Welcome to episode 11 of The Pod Couple.
The Pod Couple! The show where we look deep into each other's eyes and scream loudly into each other's mouths.
You might say our 11s are up. That's a Life Stinks joke for you deep Mel Brooks fans out there.
I didn't get it.
Yeah. Well, I think one of our listeners, he knows who he is. We'll enjoy that one. But yeah, I don't know. Are you enjoying this week, Steve?
Oh yeah, so far so good. Just had a big old bowl of garlic and a strong pot of coffee before the podcast, so rest in peace, Kyle. That's Kyle, I'm Steve, and we're the Pod Couple.
We are the Pod Couple, and we have a podcast that you're listening to. And if you want to listen to it again, you can subscribe to us on iTunes or Stitcher or Blueberry or Google Play or even YouTube. So go ahead and do that if you want to. We're not, trying to pressure you or anything.
No.
We understand no
means
worries,
no. Baby. We'll take it nice and slow.
We're gentlemen podcasters. But yeah, we like to start this thing out with a little segment we call Quick Hits.
Quick Hits!
And I think Steve might have a quick hit here.
Well, do you have any quick hits, Kyle?
I do. You want me to go first?
Yeah, I think so. Yours are better than mine usually. Usually yours involve math, which I know that people like.
You'll show me yours if I show you mine?
Something like that. I'm a gentleman.
Okay. Well, speaking of showing yours, that's ties quite well into my quick hit here. I don't know if you saw this story, but this is a local Arizona story. A high school player in his high school football team yearbook photo pulled out the old Canadian belt buckle. Are you familiar with that maneuver?
I don't know anything about Canada.
This is a Urban Dictionary reference, but
because we're hip like that.
Yeah,
with the kids.
Yeah, we're hip with things that came out in 2001. But Urban Dictionary I think is a timeless resource for all of us.
Sure.
But anyway, the Canadian belt buckle is when you take the head of your penis, when you have an erection, as the kids call it, and you just sort of slip it up over the top of your belt buckle there, so the head's peeking out.
Oh.
Yeah.
See, that's the new PC version, Canadian belt. When I was a kid, we just called it a boner volcano. Okay, well, whether you go boner volcano, whether you go Canadian belt buckle, this kid did it in his yearbook photo, but it was a football team photo, so it was like 100 yards away to fit in 70 players or whatever. And in any case, he's now facing 70 criminal charges, including 69 charges of indecent exposure because every other kid
right.
is basically a victim.
Exactly.
Wow.
And all this stuff, and potentially years in prison, all kinds of stuff. And I mean, basically, the question is this not the most ridiculous thing you've ever heard?
Well,
I mean, come on. I'm not saying you should whip your dick out in a picture, but like, let's have the punishment fit the crime. I mean, this is like, was it an immature thing to do? I mean, sure, but like, are we talking criminality? Are we talking about, did this really harm people that they potentially saw? Again, this isn't like a close-up. This isn't a selfie of his cock. I mean, we're talking about a photo that was taken from 100 yards away, a group of 70 people, and just the head of the penis stick. I don't even know what you could make out. It's like a pixel in a picture.
Yeah, how did this sort of thing even get reported? Is my question. Like, how do they find it out? Is there just like a group of people with like the zoom and enhance like CSI interface, like going over high school photographs on the suspicion that there might be dicks involved in some of them? That seems crazy.
They're called pedophiles.
Wow. You wouldn't think they would want to bring attention to this then. I think they'd want to just let that shit slide.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know exactly who discovered it. I assume that, probably it was a thing that maybe the kid bragged about it or his friends bragged about it or something, and it became. But now, and people are going around.
And that's what's wrong with kids today, is that they commit crimes and then they brag about them.
Yeah, seriously. Keep your mouth shut. Do your crimes. Do your dirt.
Keep your penis out, but keep your mouth shut, children.
Yeah, you definitely want to keep your mouth shut when penises are out. That's just good advice. For
That's
anyone.
something some of us learned the hard way.
The hard way, indeed. Yeah. So I don't know. It's just one of those things that this is the kind of shit that I think people see, and there is this sort of rebelling against like being overly PC or overly, this is kind of gives some things a bad name, where it's like yeah, we're all for having like a society where people are mature and things are protected, but it's also like you have to be reasonable about it. There is a point at which you can say, sure, like we shouldn't try to offend people, but but also like we shouldn't be throwing people in jail for a little two pixels of a dick in a picture.
It also makes the justice system seem wildly out of whack in terms of its priorities, because
Right.
if you have a 17-year-old who commits armed robbery and then kills a couple of people and isn't tried as an adult, and yet this kid is put on some sex offenders registry that follows him for the rest of his life for
Right.
like a little dick joke. It just seems like pure madness.
Well, exactly, and think about the cost to the system, like the cost of trying this guy, of housing him in jail. All these things are not cheap. These are
all of the Photoshop you're gonna have to pay for to Photoshop that dick out of all those yearbooks.
Well, here's the thing about that. They actually are having people bring the yearbooks in, and they're
I was making a joke.
Yeah, you were making a joke, but this is how ridiculous it is. This is my point. They're having people mark it with a Sharpie. They have the yearbook staff putting a little Sharpie dab, and of course, it's like the tip of a Sharpie is all you can get, and you cover the whole thing and stuff. It probably covers way more than the whole thing, and so they're dabbing it with the Sharpie one at a time, one yearbook at a time, one Canadian belt buckle at a time. So I don't know. It's kind of maddening when you see stuff like this and these wild overreactions. But that's all I got. Just wanted to bring that up because it caught my eye. Both literally and
well, I'm surprised literally it could catch your eye the way you've described it.
Yeah.
Oh man, that is absolute insanity.
Indeed. Well, that's the kind of thing we like to do on a quick
That's the sort
hit.
of thing that we're looking at in this modern world.
Yeah, nothing else insane happened at all this week. So
No, not a nary a thing.
Just that. There will be nothing else we talk about that will seem crazy in any other segment.
From literal members to fictional members of the collective conscious when it comes to characters, this is my quick hit.
Oh, so we're not talking about fictional cocks then?
Well, perhaps. It depends on where you want to steer this conversation.
I think
Kyle,
you know where I want to steer it.
Cockward ho! I just had an idea of sort of, we when we consider movie characters and TV characters and literary characters, something that popped in my head, what would you say is like a groundbreaking character in terms of something that leapt out of maybe the page or off the screen and really changed the face of the medium? And I'll tell you my example so you can see that I'm not trying to reach back into some, classic literature or explore, who the first postmodern character was, although, you could have that as a consideration. I'm going to make the scope of this pretty tiny for myself, because we like tiny scopes here. That's the only way you can see dongs in yearbook photos. I would say, I was just thinking that Rocky Maivia, the Brahma Bull, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, as a wrestling character, probably one of the most influential characters, certainly for the sport of wrestling, of professional wrestling, sports entertainment, that I can possibly think of, because he was kind of the Tristram Shandy of his day. He was sort of one of the first that I can recall growing up with the WWF in the 80s, being a fan of wrestling in the early 90s. He was kind of the first guy who was like a Bruce Willis, John McClane sort of character who was kind of winking at the camera the entire time and saying like, I know this is fake. I know you know this is fake. Let's milk it for all it's worth. I mean, the people's elbow as a move, as a finishing move, is just exactly that. It's just a guy running back and forth with and then an elbow drop. It's like the most basic, ridiculous wrestling move that kind of lets you know. So, and I think that wrestling wouldn't be anywhere near, wouldn't have stayed as popular and wouldn't be anywhere near as popular as it is now without that kind of pivot from, hey guys, no, it's real. Oh, the cat's out of the bag. Now we have all of the, what they call the smarks, which is the smart marks, the people that freely admit that wrestling is scripted. Everybody knows that now. I think The Rock has a lot to do with that.
Yeah, I would say that I think that that has more to do, or less to do with The Rock and more to do with the Monday Night Wars era of wrestling, when WCW Nitro and Monday Night Raw were constantly trying to one up each other, and it became the pushing the boundaries, breaking the fourth wall, all those things became a way to differentiate the product. And so it became an arms race in regards to that. I think that predated really The Rock coming on the scene.
Sure, it did, but
he came in the midst of that. But I would see that as being, as far as changing what you think, I do think that The Rock is probably groundbreaking in another way, which is that he was, I think, the first person to play what was more or less a comedy gimmick and ride it all the way to the top as, like, for a sustained amount of time. Most comedy gimmicks in wrestling have a pretty short shelf life, and then, or you can only go so far with it, and then it just peaks out. So for him to be a guy who was at the top of the sport for several years, and then obviously was able to leverage that into a successful movie career.
Probably the most successful movie, the most successful by far that a professional wrestler.
Yeah, that's not even a debate. I mean, I
if
think
he sued Gawker,
The Rock
he might even overtake Hulk Hogan as like richest wrestler ever.
Yeah, well, except Gawker can't afford to pay. Because,
although Hogan is suing them again. Did you see that?
Yeah, suing them for not paying the money they don't have to pay.
Yeah, that's
suing
great.
them for more money. Yeah, well, I think that the thing about The Rock is not only is he the most successful wrestler, he's actually the most successful movie star in the world today. He's the most bankable movie star right now. Like, if you add up the international grosses of his movies, I think he's number one.
Wow.
Like, in the last 2 years or something like that, whatever the
Damn, Kyle, coming at it with the hard trivia. There's nothing this man doesn't know about.
Yeah, you try to stump me with some wrestling. Had another thing coming. My groundbreaking character, which is totally off the top of my head, and I totally did not prepare for this at all because I had no heads up whatsoever from you.
Yeah, that's the way we like to run things here. Fast and loose like a Brahma bull.
Is actually going to be Ozymandias from
The Watchmen.
From The Watchmen,
Yeah, that's a fine choice.
Because, I think that the thing about him...
Watchmen spoilers. Yeah. By the way,
if you haven't read the Watchmen comic, first off, shame on you. Read it. I actually waited way too long to read it, so
did I. But then I read it like 4 times in a row, so made up for it. Also, if you haven't listened to the podcast that frequently, full heads up, we spoil everything constantly all the time, so just get used to it.
Yes. Spoiler alert: we're going to spoil things. And yeah, The Watchmen, incredible, obviously groundbreaking comic book in a lot of ways, and a lot of the characters could be considered groundbreaking. But the reason I pick Ozymandias, he's one of the heroes of the comic book, but he also ends up being the ultimate villain in the comic book, but yet also the ultimate hero in the comic book. And this is why it's so brilliant. This is why it's so groundbreaking, I think, is this idea that in comics, the people who are traditionally heroes, the guys who put on a costume or a mask or whatever and go out there and beat up the street thugs, right? But Ozymandias is the guy who is looking at the biggest of the big pictures and saying, sometimes you got to do a lot of evil to get the ultimate good end result. And that's something that I think is just so much more sophisticated than most comics had done at that point in time, and something that still continues to be a problem today. I mean, this is something that occurred to me as I was watching the Daredevil series on Netflix. I haven't seen any of season 2 yet, but I watched season 1, and as I was watching it, I was thinking that the Vincent D'Onofrio's character, which I'm blanking on the Kingpin, Wilson Fisk, right? But they don't call him Kingpin, right? So Wilson Fisk, I'm thinking, man, this guy is really kind of the hero of this story. As if you step back and look at it, big picture, it's like what's happening here, right? Like Daredevil is putting on a mask and going around and beating up some like underprivileged street thugs, you know?
Right.
And like, what is that accomplishing, you know, to beat the bejesus out of, you know, some, you know, sure, it might be emotionally satisfying to beat up a rapist or something, but what is it accomplishing?
And no one would fault you for that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we all like to slap around a rapist now and again.
Rapist, therapist, whatever.
But Fisk is sitting there, and I can't remember what the plan was exactly. It was somewhat convoluted. I think he was like buying up real estate and then somehow bringing property values down with crime so that he could buy up more and then gentrify the city or whatever. But bottom line is he was looking big picture at like, how do we make this city like a better place for everyone? And it seems like that plan, as convoluted as it was, probably had a lot better chance of succeeding at doing that than just running around and beating up some random criminals, some random street criminals. So that's kind of, and Ozymandias is like the ultimate version of that.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you bring that character up, because just earlier today I was thinking, like, let's say you had let's say you had somehow some magic virus that could go after specifically without any, you know, crazy ramifications. It's like, I don't even know why I said virus, just some magic spell where you kill like 100,000 people, and that somehow solves like a good amount of the Earth's, you know, energy problems. It solves, you know, it just leads to good things down the line, you know what I mean? It starts famine, and you're in charge of that list of people who get killed. Like, so this is a targeted spell. Okay.
So I can actually, this isn't just like you press the button in the box and like,
and it's not random.
Some 1,000 random people.
It's not random. It's very well thought out. So you know, they give you a list of people you can choose from.
Okay.
So you say you have like 500,000 people to choose from, but you only need to narrow it down to 100,000. So these are some pretty vile people. You know, across the board, it's stretched. You know, different countries. It's not all concentrated in one place. Like, now you can basically press that button to unleash that, take care of these people, and save the world in a bigger picture. First of all, do you do that?
I don't see how I don't.
Okay. Here's where you might not. So yeah, I think most people would say, yeah, I would do that. You know, if you're being reasonable.
I mean, it's this is all depending too on like what exactly what's the end result from a good standpoint? Like, you're just sort of vaguely saying make the world a better place. I would probably want more specifics than that, but we'll assume it's like things that are so significant that any reasonable person would be in favor of them.
Yeah. Like, if you don't do it, then like in 80 years, if we don't come up with a different solution, like, we're doomed as a species. Okay. For example, is that 80 years like a good enough time frame? Because that still allows a little room for a little wiggle room. Maybe we'll be perfectly fine. Maybe we can self-correct in 80 years without this intervention.
Yeah. I think the singularity is coming way sooner than 80 years.
You think it's way sooner than 80 years?
Yeah.
You are an optimist, sir. I like it.
I'm thinking more like 40, 45.
Okay. So then, so let's say we have 20 years to self-correct. Do you press the button then?
You're saying we have 20, like the button, what is the button doing though?
The button is gonna allow us to self-correct.
Is it getting us to the singularity?
No, but it's getting us so that we're not wiped out.
Okay.
Completely. And otherwise we have 20 years to figure something else out.
Yeah, and if we press it, otherwise we're going to be wiped out in 20 years.
Correct.
So we're definitely going to be wiped out before we get to singularity.
Unless we happen to get the singularity before that, but you can flip the coin on that, roll the dice.
Yeah, I'm not rolling the dice on 20 years, so yeah, I'll press the button.
Okay, do you press the button? Second caveat, everything else exactly the same. One of the people on the list, the last person on the list, you. And as soon as you press it, it's lights out, Holmes.
Yeah, I think I still press it.
Wow.
Because I mean, I have kids, right? So
sure you do. I guess. Are they yours? I've seen some children around you.
Well,
I've never asked too many questions.
I guess I'll be getting a paternity test now that you've raised that point. But I think you have to in that scenario. I mean, and for those of you who don't know, we keep throwing around the word singularity. The singularity is essentially the point.
It's like the thing wrestlers wear.
The singlet area.
Oh,
Yeah, that would be a good gimmick for a wrestler. So, but it's essentially like nerd heaven, if you want to like boil
or
it down.
hell.
But yeah, it could be hell too. But the idea is it's the time at which like humans and machines will merge into be an indistinguishable thing, and so or the idea at the point at which artificial intelligence becomes so powerful that nothing else matters. So at that point in time, either that artificial intelligence will be so powerful that it will solve all of our problems and, instill some sort of utopian society, or it'll just wipe us out.
Yeah, or they're pressing the button, except in this case, everyone's gone.
Yeah, it's basically, it's probably a 50-50 shot as to which scenario happens when artificial intelligence reaches the exceeds human capacity by a very wide margin. But anyway, we're on the road there, so
nothing you can do about it.
A lot of things you can do to
take that, Elon Musk.
Yeah. So that really went far afield.
Yeah, well, these quick hits are, in keeping with tradition, quite quick. Really snappy chats we're having.
Might have to change the name of this segment.
Speaking of Elon Musk, let's talk about some Musk-see TV. How's that for a segue?
Is that like adjacent to Smell-O-Vision?
Yeah, exactly. That's what he's working on next.
Bringing it back. So, I think that when you talk about must-see TV, usually you're talking about Game of Thrones, and we're definitely going to talk about Game of Thrones episode 2. But before we get to that, there's another great show which ended just a couple of weeks ago. Well, ended its second season just a couple of weeks ago. We talked about it several weeks ago on the podcast, I think after maybe the third episode or so. But we wanted to circle back, touch base on the rest of the season. The show, of course, is Better Call Saul. And what are your thoughts, big picture, on this season now that it's in the books, sir?
It's been a great season so far. Very much enjoyed it. I don't think that will come as a surprise to you or to anyone else, really. Overall, left it in a nice cliffhanger spot. I think that it's good that although we ultimately know what happens to Bob Odenkirk's character, down the road, this show is still great at building tension in these backstories. And you really, really are intrigued with the history. It feels rich. It doesn't feel forced at all.
Yeah.
They're just so great about doing that. And you watched the end of the last episodes like more recently than me. So what's your take?
Yeah, well, I think what you said is really remarkable that they've been able to do this, because this is the Achilles heel of any prequel, right?
Sure.
Is that we already know what's going to happen to the characters, so the suspense is gone. So the fact that they're able to still create suspense on a very regular basis, for all these characters is pretty incredible.
Yeah, The Hobbit was the first book that I ever read. And I love that book. It's what got me into reading. Didn't see the Hobbit movies, when they came out. Because I was like, look, I saw Lord of the Rings.
Right.
So just the idea of prequels, never something that appealed to me.
Yeah. Also, the Hobbit movies are horrible. So.
Well, yeah. I suppose if they had been like just applauded left and right critically or by my friends or by anybody I knew, then I probably would have seen them. So maybe my not viewing them is neither here nor there, but. It was the first thing I came up with.
I think they should rename them Peter Jackson Cash Grab Trilogy. But yeah, very much going through the motions on that one. I think the thing about Better Call Saul, some of the thoughts I had, one of them is, what a performance by Michael McKean.
Yeah.
I mean, that's, he's a guy who's been kicking around for God knows how long. I mean, he's been on a million different things, and of course usually plays a comic character, but on this it's a very dramatic, serious character. In fact, even though the show definitely has moments of levity, he is not a source of those almost ever, unless it's sort of inadvertent, but just obviously has dramatic chops that I did not know he has. And we
see that time and time again with really funny people, though.
Right. Well, we do. And we also, and particularly, I think
with Vince Gilligan.
Right. Because you look at Bob Odenkirk, who is a guy who, again, came on the scene, became popular because of his comedic chops. And another guy is even, why am I blanking on his name?
Curdy Furtzberg.
Bryan Cranston.
Oh,
you know, of course, who prior to Breaking Bad, which that of course is what he's known for now, is the first thing anyone thinks of. But before that, his two most famous roles were Malcolm in the Middle and on Seinfeld as the dentist. So both of which were definitely comedy roles. So somehow Gilligan is able to see these comic actors and see another dimension there that other people are missing, or draw it out of them with the great writing. Or I don't know what it is. It's
Vince Gilligan is such a gift to old white comic actors, man. He's really doing it for them.
That's true. I guess they all have that in common, right?
They're all sort of schlubby.
Yeah. But yeah, so
maybe not Cranston so much. He's pretty good looking.
But yeah, but that's so impressive to see the way that they would take these guys that you would not have looked at as those type of characters, I think, prior to seeing them on these shows. And I think it's probably exciting for them too, especially you say older actors who, to a certain degree, I'm sure have been typecast and kind of fit into their niche, and they're like, well, this is where I'm at. This is the kind of roles that I play, and so to get a chance to stretch in this way has got to be very exciting.
Especially with Odenkirk, you can kind of see this. I mean, he was sort of in many, not just sketches, but in many of his appearances prior to this, sort of a sleazy salesman type of character, which of course is how we're introduced to Saul in the first place. But then to strip away that outer layer and really dive deep into this guy as a human being, and not just a human being, a pretty goddamn decent human being when it comes down to it. That's really remarkable.
Definitely. The another thing that I think I have a lot of praise for this show is something that is the way that they treat the relationship between the brothers. Obviously that has really driven this season. I mean, it drove last season too, but it's kicked it into higher gear this season with the relationship between Chuck and Jimmy, and it's because they do such a good job of walking that tightrope between these guys are effectively enemies and antagonists much of the time, but yet they still love each other because they're brothers and they're family. And I don't know, it feels very, very true.
Both of their motivations seem completely legitimate too.
Right.
Like they both have their failings, and we can see those failings as the audience, and they both have this sort of pure intention. As much as you are rooting for Jimmy, you understand completely where Michael McKean's character is coming from. Like, we've all seen that person growing up who sort of fucked up and then was living this charmed life, even though, like, I'm basically that person. You know what I mean?
I was about to say.
I know people.
I know someone
people feel this
exactly
way.
like that. Yeah. No, but and it's funny because I have a good relationship with my brother.
I can't imagine why.
Yeah.
Not on the basketball court.
Yeah, but that ties into what I'm saying here, which is that so even though I don't certainly don't have a contentious relationship like this, in all of our years together, of course we've had moments of antagonism. We've had moments where we've been very angry with each other. They're few and far between, but nevertheless, they have happened. And even when those things happen, even when these schisms happen, there's never a point at which, as angry as you can be, where you don't still love that person. And so that's something that you can certainly relate to, even that this is blown out to a much more expansive degree than I've ever had in my life. But
even when your brother
real.
Noah ratted you out for doing the old Canadian belt buckle in your family portrait, you still found a way to forgive him.
Yeah. I just sent him extra copies of the portrait. That's present for forgiveness here. But so anyway, so I really like that. One of the things the show has gotten some criticism for that I've seen is this idea that the show doesn't really know what kind of show it wants to be, right? Like it's sometimes it's a vigilante cop show, sometimes it's a lawyer procedural, sometimes it's like a con artist yarn, sometimes it wants to be a family relationship drama. It's like, what does the show really want to be? And its inability to sort of pick is treated as a failing. But to me, I almost flip it on its head and look at it as, what an accomplishment, because I like all of those shows.
Yeah,
like,
me too.
It's like I'm thinking, how amazing is it that they're able to make all these different shows within this show, and that I like them all.
I don't know if you just Fox News, some people said me on this one, and like this, no one actually made that argument, but I can't imagine that holding any water. And it is consistent with Gilligan's background. Obviously, there are some great like bottle type episodes and side stories in Breaking Bad, but the dude does come from X-Files, and that was an episode of the week plus overarching mythology, like the entire thing. And his ability to tell very specific stories, but still have them tie all together, I think is one of the show's strengths. I'm totally with you on that.
Okay. Well, the anonymous people say 0, pod couple 1 on that one. But, yeah. And the thing that I think, I was like looking at it, I'm going, okay, so this show obviously is a very good show and we like it, but what really sets it apart from other shows of its ilk, right? And I think that the writing, certainly the writing, the characterization is a big part of it. And that's probably the biggest part of it. But there's another, about the way that the show is made from a production standpoint, there is this ingenuity and this ability to go to some next level shit that I think sets it apart. There's specific, small scenes where you say, I don't think any of the show would have done it quite this way. And the thing that jumped out at me from the last episode, from the finale, in regards to that, was sort of the Chuck torture scene. If you recall this, he's strapped to the gurney, and of course he's, electro sensitive. And so and the doctors are not paying any attention to that because this is just an emergency room situation. So he's struggling against it. And the doctors are just going about their business and doing their business-like thing, but the bright lights are shining on him, and they're attaching electrodes to him, and all this thing that's totally freaking him out. And the beauty of it is they shoot it upside down, tight on him, and they just leave the camera there. They don't move it, and it just stays there for a good, 3 minutes, something like that, 3-4 minutes. You just see the doctor's hands coming in and out, hear their voices, their footsteps as they go around him, and it just stays on. And that's I don't know, I don't feel like there's a lot of shows that would do that way. And so you see things like that consistently. And you saw this on Breaking Bad too. They had a way of taking stories that other shows might tell, but telling them in a next level way. So
yeah. And my big takeaway from that finale was when Clay Duvall is talking to Saul, Clay Duvall's character, the doctor. Mm-hmm. And
good to see her getting some work.
Yeah, the perpetual observer she is. And she talks about how Michael McKean's character is in sort of a self-induced coma, or a comatose or vegetative state. Catatonic state. That's what. Thank you very much. And I just thought, like, oh man, that's a great way to like get out of shit. If I can just learn to do that really effectively. Yeah. I mean, that's commitment to a bit right there.
Yeah. Unfortunately, you just announced it on the podcast. So
that's okay. Nobody listens to this.
You will not be. Has Casey been turned off from the podcast now? So,
well, she usually quits by now.
Yeah,
she'll do that thing of where she'll listen to the first 10 minutes and then be like, "Yeah, I liked it when you guys talked about the quick hits.
I liked it when you guys said welcome to episode 11 of the Pod Couple. That part was neat."
Yeah. Then I had a meeting at work. Sure. Okay.
Yeah. All right. Well. I think that's really my big picture for Better Call Saul. I don't have a lot else to talk about with this. I mean, we could get into certainly some more details on some of these stories, but it's all well done. It's obviously it's a great show. It's one of my favorites right now. So beyond
we
that,
didn't even get into Mike kind of slowly sinking into the mire and just like not being able to resist the quicksand, the world of the cartels enveloping him. But there'll be plenty more time to talk about that in season 3, I'm sure.
Yeah, assuming the Pod Couple's still around by then.
Oh yeah, we'll be on at least episode 13 by then.
Might take a small hiatus of 8 months. So, all right, well, there's more TV to get to, so we've got to just keep this thing moving. You know how we do.
Yeah.
And lickety split, we're going to talk about Game of Thrones episode 2. And a lot happened in this episode.
Yeah, just like the first one.
Yeah. And, the first question is too much happening too fast?
I had that exact thought. And it doesn't come from a place of me saying, like, I don't like it, I don't enjoy the faster pace. It almost is concerning to me from the standpoint of, are they going to run out of shit to talk about? Like, are they trying to sew things up just for the sake of sewing them up? Do they have something to prove? Are they saying, like, look how much more rapidly we can move without the books now that we're not beholden to them? I mean, there are a lot of questions to be asked, and it does seem like perhaps some of this might be just like a ballsy statement. Like, look at us, this is what we can do, which is fine until you run out of steam, until you're just forcing things together, until it becomes sort of like too fan servicey and these stories don't have time to breathe and to build and to reflect like the actual epic nature of the story so far.
Well, and that's been so much of the beauty of this show, I think, is that ability to build and to really create an expansive universe and have these stories breathe and have them feel like things are momentous when these things happen. And we've had a lot of deaths, obviously, over the course of the show and whatnot, but they generally feel momentous in a way that these recent deaths haven't. We had 3 pretty major characters, pretty major power players in the world of Game of Thrones die in this last 2 episodes. And of course, starting with Doran Martell in the first episode, and then we get, boom, boom, Roose Bolton and Balin Greyjoy.
And I know you were a huge Roose Bolton fan.
I know. I was so
That's such a bummer, man. I felt for you.
I just, made my peace with him being a poor man's Tywin, and I had a calculating, conniving son of a bitch to lay my, to hang my hat on, and then they go and fucking shuffle him off the stage very unceremoniously, I must say. I mean, for what a major character he was in the show, it felt like a cheap death.
Yeah, it did.
And
I will say this in defense of that death, like the way they handled it, I wasn't completely cool with, but it made me feel a little bit better because that sort of politically motivated murder made sense. It was like more enjoyable to see Ramsay do that than to just sort of murder people willy-nilly because he's like a sadist and a sociopath.
Yeah. But this is, and I don't have a problem with the motivation, but this is part of what we're talking about, that moving too fast.
Yeah.
It's like,
no, I agree.
He finds out like that she's had a boy, that Walda's had a boy, and then he stabs him like within 2 sentences of that. Like it's not, there's no time for that to build. Like that should have been a moment. I feel like you have the moment now as a boy, you see the pain in Ramsay's face, and then you have that slow build boil to the decision. Yes, I have to kill my father now because this guy's going to replace me. This
definitely felt less than Shakespearean.
Yeah, so you to have it happen so quickly, it just felt that was such just a move for narrative expediency. Like, let's move the story along.
Just like the bridge scene, it's very much the same way.
Right. Oh yeah, absolutely.
And the Dorne scene, just all 3 of them really were just sort of lightning bolt.
And at least the
Tommy gun deaths.
At least the Dorne one, they had kind of built it up over the course of the previous season, even though those scenes had been mostly forgettable, so you may have forgotten that they had built it up. But I mean, they had been showing the strain between the Sand Snakes and what's her name, Ilaria, and Doran and his policies of appeasement and whatnot. So I think that had some build, but the other ones were pretty quick. Especially, we hadn't seen Balin Greyjoy in a long time, and then the first time we see him, within 3 minutes, he's plummeting to his death in the rocks below. Now let's talk about that for a moment, because I mean, this bridge, like, is there a Westerosi equivalent of OSHA? Like, who's inspecting this bridge? I mean, this thing was pretty fucking rickety, and dangerous. Yeah. Like, the thing is, it's coming out of like the king's chambers, right? Like if this was like a peasant's house on the Iron Islands, you're like, all right, look, I understand the guy doesn't have money for renovations, like he can't really repair the bridge. He's doing, making do, just trying to feed his family. But like the king, I mean, I understand he's kind of a cut rate king here, sort of like running 7th in a 5-king race. But still, you think that they might be able to do a little better than a couple of twigs strung up.
A child's model toothpick bridge
Right.
in the wind and the rain. Here's the thing: is like, okay, so you could possibly make the defense that like this is what the Krakens are all about. They're just like hard scrabble existence, and like the more Spartan you are, then the more you deserve to be king. So yeah, we have this shitty bridge. But maybe if you're an old ass man, don't walk out in the middle of a huge storm onto some crazy ass bridge that's like 1,000 feet. But like, just wait for the other guy to cross, man. Come on.
I mean, yeah, really, the surprise was not that he got thrown to his death. The surprise was that he didn't die like decades ago if he's crossing that bridge all the time. I mean, the fact that he had made it, presumably across that bridge, like millions of times in his life, that's it's hard to believe.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, maybe the bridge was better. Maybe it's fallen into disrepair, hard times on the Iron Isles. Piracy is not bringing in the booty that it used to. But...
Also, it wasn't very, like, for a guy that was all about toughness and being like a all macho, seafaring drowned god type of guy, that girly Hans Gruber scream on the way down really didn't. It wasn't a civilized or
dignified
death for that dude. So
yeah.
The actor didn't do that. They added that shit in post.
He's so mad when he watched the episode. That made me sound like a bitch. Yeah.
So were there some things that you liked about the episode?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, obviously it's still good. I mean, this even though I wish they would slow down a little at this point.
Do you think they will?
I don't know. I mean, it's not even about slowing down. It's just about, because there's still so many things you can do to move the story along, but it's about making these moments mean a little more when they happen, I think.
Which I think they did a good job with. Obviously, we're bearing the lead here, but Jon Snow being back. I feel like they treated the actual resurrection fairly well, like the scene itself.
I turned the episode off like 2 minutes before the end, so I don't know what.
When I said resurrection, I meant vivisection.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think that here's the thing. I think they were in an absolutely tough spot with that because
it's the worst kept secret. It's the thing that we all knew.
Right, we all knew. So how do you make a moment climactic that's going to inherently be anticlimactic because everyone knows it, right? So that was the challenge they were put in, and they really, to me, I think that the solution might have been, and I understand why they didn't do this because obviously it was, it was almost had to be the season-ending cliffhanger, but I feel like it probably would have worked better if it had happened at the end of episode 1 of season 6, right? The death, him getting stabbed to death had happened, and then we only would have had a week to think about it,
right?
And discuss. I mean, of course, the book readers already had known about it for years, so there's sort of already that. But as far as the show watchers go, I do feel like having the entire year to think about it and talk about it and discuss all the ways he might come back and, break down the last episode frame by frame and, and look back into exactly how
you
things...
basically, with the internet, you have this sort of... all these fan theories become like a million monkeys working at a million typewriters and then banging out. Like, you have so many people putting out so many ideas and people putting out very specific ideas who are going to say, I called it exactly like it is. And of course you are, because you have that many choices. So one guy's going to be like, yep, some lunatic who's never right about anything about the books before is going to get this bang on,
Right. Yeah. And it wasn't that hard to predict anyway. I mean, if you just
see some lunatic.
Yeah. So, but I mean, exactly how it would go down. I mean, I think is up for debate. But that Melisandre would be involved, and I mean, those things they had set the groundwork pretty clearly, I think, in the show. And so yeah. And so what are you going to do? So then it's going to feel anticlimactic if you have a whole year to wait for that to happen, and it basically happens like that, unless they'd thrown a real curveball in there. And had it happen in a way that didn't involve Melisandre at all, and like something, like, I don't know, Jon turned into a walker or something. I don't
Yeah.
know. I mean, like this, they gone a real strange route with it. I think even that probably would have been weird enough.
Could have
but-
had Bran
right.
warg into John.
Yeah,
That would have solved the growing spurt problem. You just never see him again.
So whatever. But so I think that under the circumstances they placed themselves in by putting it at the end of season 5, I think they did a pretty good job of, especially with, really drawing out that scene and doing the, pan after pan up John's, naked, just freshly washed body up to his face, cue eyes opening. Nope.
I will say, for how dedicated like Davos was to the idea of maybe she can bring him back, they seem to give up pretty quickly. Like, he was like really reticent. She said no. He said try again. She comes in, then they both leave after like 2 seconds. Like, it didn't work. Okay, well, let's get out of here.
Yeah, ye of little faith. I mean, you understand why her faith is broken, but
Yeah.
And Davos, to be fair, I don't know how much he really. I mean, he was always a skeptic to start with, right? So, I mean, even though I feel like a Hail Mary for him to say, let's try it, but maybe he didn't have that much faith in it or that it was actually going to work. But that's also perhaps me rationalizing what they needed to do to set it up.
One thing Rick brought up, which I was interested in your take on, your cousin Rick, old Dr. Rick, who might be a guest on the podcast some time down the road. One thing he was saying was, do you think, like, what's the deal with Melisandre never having tried this before? Like, Thoros or whatever supposedly has done this with Beric Dondarrion at least like half a dozen times, and presumably with like other people, right? So how come Melisandre, who's clearly 4,000 years old, how has she never come across like this spell in particular?
Yeah, well, she says this shouldn't be possible, right? Like, she said that it shouldn't have been possible for Thoros to do that. And so I don't know, like, the thing that I think is weirder when you think about it that way is that how did she even know what words to say or whatever? Like, where was she just like pulling them out of her ass? Was she just going her shapely pale ass? Was she just going like depending on whether she's wearing them down and saying like,
Rub-a-dub-dub, thanks for the grub.
Yeah, rub-a-dub-dub, Lord of Light, bring this schlub back. I don't know what the words, but I mean, like, because it felt like in the scene like it was a very prepared ritual that she kind of knew, but given that she didn't even think she could do it and that she had never even heard of such a thing happening until Thoros, and she just certainly didn't get like a spell book from him or anything that we saw. Like, where was she coming up with this? I almost thought that
maybe it's like one of those internet videos where you see somebody opening a bottle of wine with just a shoe by banging it. Have you seen those? And you watch it and you go, okay, I know that thing exists, but there's no way that could possibly work in real life.
Right.
And then finally you're like, oh, okay, I guess we'll just go for it. Put a shoe on Jon Snow's head and bang it against the table until it opens up.
Yeah. That must have been what it was. Maybe she watched a YouTube video real quick, you're saying, of how to do it.
They're off book now, so they can go anywhere with the story.
She just Googled, Lord of Light Resurrection, hoped for the best. Yeah. So anyway, I mean, that scene was, I think, again, they did as good as they could. It wasn't an amazing scene, but
it almost couldn't have been an amazing scene,
right? So I think with what they had to work with, they did a pretty solid job. I don't know, one thing that probably goes without saying, but it really this most recent episode made me start thinking about it in a more systematic way, is or just a more comprehensive way, is just the motto of the show should be, it's not good to be the king, because, like, think about the body count here, right?
Yeah.
I mean, now we've got the War of the Five Kings. All 5 of them are now dead. We got Joffrey, Renly, Stannis, Balon, and Robb Stark, of course. Yeah. And so those are the 5 kings. Yeah. Then, of course, the thing that set the War of the Five Kings in motion was the death of another king, Robert Baratheon. Robert Baratheon became king by starting a war that killed the previous king, Aerys Targaryen.
Mm-hmm. So, Mance Rayder.
Right, Mance Rayder, King Beyond the Wall. Yeah, a sixth king, I guess, in this scenario, in this Westeros scenario, obviously dead, burned at the stake. We've got then if you want to start looking, across the narrow sea, Khal Drogo was more or less the king of his people, in a sense, and he certainly met a grisly end. You've got within, if you even take a step down from kings and you say, okay, like let's set the kings aside for a second here, start looking at
how them hands doing.
Yeah. Well, certainly the hands of king, but even just look at the heads of the major houses, right? The house, House Stark, Ned obviously decapitated. House Lannister, you've got Tywin bolt through the belly while you're sitting on the shitter. You've got
still the best.
You've got House Martell. Of course, we just saw Doran. Take a knife between the ribs. You've got House Bolton, Roose.
Yeah.
Also took a knife between the ribs from his own son. Ramsay doing his best to put the bastard son. And I know there's a bunch more that we're missing. I mean, John Aaron, house, in his house Aaron, obviously, was died off screen, before the credits even rolled on the first show. But that really is what set the show into motion. Of course, was his murder by, as we now know, Littlefinger and Lysa, his wife. And I'm sure there's like a bunch of other people I'm not even thinking.
Yeah,
of
we'll be here all day.
Doing lords. But this is what I'm saying. I mean, like who on this show now at this point, who's in a position of power, has not died, has not been killed off. I mean, it's amazing when you look at, we start just breaking it down like that systematically and going down the list.
You can't even make the argument that Jon Snow is the longest lasting character because he has died at this point.
Right.
He's the earliest character, the very first character we're introduced to, and then he, even he took one. Now, obviously, being killed in the show doesn't stop you from being on the show or in the books or in the world, but it seems like probably maybe Bran is the character that's been around the longest or was introduced the earliest that is still alive.
Perhaps. I mean,
definitely not been around for the most time, considering he was off for the entirety of last season, and then came back in this episode for a matter of 5 minutes. They were like a good 5 minutes.
I mean, there are obviously several characters introduced in the first episode who are still around. I mean, Theon and Sansa.
Yeah, but I'm being
Arya,
like really specific about the earliest.
Oh, like you mean like the first person we see on screen or something?
Yeah.
Is Bran the first person we see on screen?
Well, no, Jon's the first person we see on screen.
Oh, okay.
But you can't count him because he died.
Okay.
I'm going strictly. It's probably. I mean, maybe Tyrion, or either the Lannister, Cersei or Jaime or Bran. Or Arya. It's got to be one of those.
Yeah. Well. Yeah, obviously but none of these. I mean, very few of these people have been in a position of real power, right? I mean,
true.
Cersei, arguably, but even she's never been in a position of real power. I mean, that's of course been one of the things she's chafed against and been sort of the bugaboo of her existence is the fact that she has always been adjacent to power, but not able to grab it for herself despite her deepest wishes.
Do you think that now that Roose Bolton's dead, that you have to give it to the High Sparrow as your sort of dignified villain?
The Bernie Sanders of Westeros?
Yeah, right. He's a Trump in Sanders clothing, bro.
He's a much more cutthroat version of Sanders, but yeah. Maybe if Bernie Sanders had a little more High Sparrow in him, he would be sewing up the nomination right about now.
Yeah. Instead of sewing his toupee tightly onto his head, like some people.
Jonathan,
it feels like a good politics segue, but we still have more to Game of Thrones to talk about.
Probably so. I mean, well, you brought up Bran. Obviously, you brought up Bran as being somebody who has been around for quite a while, but hasn't been around recently. In fact, not only did he miss the entire fifth season, but also missed the first episode of this season. But he does get to start off this episode, and we see him not only do we see him having grown about a foot since the last time he was on the show, how long has he been under that tree?
He's been sucking like a baby sucks the marrow from a pregnant woman's bones if it doesn't get its nutrition. So Bran sucketh the nutrition from this tree.
I like you're really getting into the Game of Thrones here.
Sucketh, he doth. Yeah,
because that's the way they speak on the show. If you haven't watched it,
something good pussy or bad pussy. I fucked it up.
But we see him, and then of course we also get a glimpse into the past, which was pretty exciting. I thought it was, seeing the young Ned Stark and Benjen Stark, and then of course most importantly seeing the young Lyanna Stark, who I think that's clearly going to be leading to more Lyanna-centric flashbacks, presumably also involving Rhaegar, and seeing how that whole story played out, leading to presumably to the birth of the young Jon Snow.
And what a deft treatment of Hodor, who's sort of like a Game of Thrones mascot-y type of character that you never really, all of the speculation about what might happen or what has come to pass, like, that's never something anyone was really considering. Like, where does Hodor come from? What's his backstory? And then in a matter of like 30 seconds, you're like, that's fascinating. He used to be able to talk quite normally.
Yes. Yeah. That's, and I assume that's going to be going somewhere, right? That we're going to see.
Hodor is deeper... Kaiser Soze.
Yeah. Hodor is the Night's King. So, yeah, that's definitely got me intrigued as to see where that goes as well. So, that was the best part of that flashback, is that it teased a lot of stuff.
It does. And not only that, but it sort of establishes, that device that can be used to tell different stories throughout flashbacks or at anywhere else in the kingdom. It's sort of this concentrated prophetic dream power that now the writers have. Like, anytime we can't really effectively get to somewhere, we just have Bran magic his way there and look through those eyes. So
yeah, exactly. Third person omniscience, here we come. Yeah. So I like that. I think one of the things I thought about as a potential running segment for these Game of Thrones breakdowns, since we'll probably be doing them on a practically weekly basis, and I'll just bring it up now, since why prepare for the show when you can
let's do it, man,
figure it out on the fly. But this an idea of maybe doing like each week where there's like a badassery of the week and a like brutality of the week, something like that. I don't know if those names are going to stick here, but the idea of like, what was the most badass moment of the week and what was like the most brutal gut punch type moment of the week.
Okay. And I'll throw into the ring, I like to throw a hat for maybe the best line or the funniest moment. Okay. Let's do that.
Okay, we can do that.
The fool of the week.
So I think the gut punch moment of the week, we can just go ahead and just get it out of the way, because I don't think there's any way we're not going to say the same thing. And that is, anytime you're going to have an infant devoured by ravenous dogs.
Badassery. That's what we're doing, badassery? Yeah. Funniest moment of the week?
Yeah. Most humorous?
That was pretty gross. And exactly, it's coming, and you know that he's capable of it, but it's still...
Well, it
almost comes to a point in your head where you're thinking, like, how much, it's coming, how much will the show?
Right.
And that's where the anticipation is.
Yeah.
Like, how gross are they going to make it? Because I know I'm going to have to watch it.
Exactly. Well, I think that's one of the reasons why it was effective, for that reason. And also just, to me, almost the most effective part was even before they get to the kennel. Because at least the kennel, what's going to happen. It's like, all right, so the dogs are going to eat him. But...
Yeah, just Ramsay holding the child.
When he says, "Can I hold him?"
Yeah.
And at that point, of course, we know that Roose is dead, and he's the new Lord Bolton, but Walda doesn't yet. And so, but clearly does not want to part with her infant child and hand them over to Ramsay, but also clearly does not want to say no to him, because who knows what powder keg that could set off. And just that moment of her handing him over and thinking, like, is he going to dash his head against a rock? I mean, God knows what's going to happen here. That was the most...
There's a precedent for that, obviously. Babies getting their heads dashed against rocks.
Right. But that was a moment of suspense for me where I was going, feeling queasy and going, oh my, what is going to happen? Your stomach clenching up. And then, of course, as they got to the kennels, it became clear what was going to happen. And Delaney, of course, was just not even able to look at the screen for like the last 2 minutes of that
Yeah, I
scene.
don't blame her.
So
Yeah, that must have hit. I'm guessing now that you've brought this up, I'm guessing, speaking of heads being dashed against rocks, that the badass moment of the week comes from our friend Sir Gregor Clegane.
yeah,
Redivivus.
yeah, it's probably hard to go with anything else. I mean, that is an efficient way of killing a man.
Yeah.
I mean,
Like, thank God he's not in charge of that kid who stuck his dick out in the high school. Like, at least we're not going that far.
yeah, yeah. Although, would save a lot of money for all the imprisonment and trial and everything like that. I mean, this is just I'm not saying we should dash the guy's head against a rock. I'm just saying that there is something.
It would cost the taxpayer less.
Yeah, I'm saying there's a tax savings to be had.
Yeah, from Canadian belt buckle to Colombian necktie.
I mean, think about Westeros. Like, that guy was a bottom feeder. He was probably just sucking on the King's Landing teat.
I have to applaud HBO on their cross promotion, getting Ray from Girls to play that part. Yeah, that's all I could see when I looked at that guy.
Yeah,
it's clearly not him, but
yeah. Well, look, I mean, this is you show your cock and you pay the consequences. So, especially if you show it to the Queen and your name is not Lannister. So, but yeah, let's talk funniest moment then.
I wrote it down just because I thought it was great. Right, so it's before Tyrion goes all I've got to free the dragons and does the old Harry and the Hendersons with him. When he's upstairs talking and he's talking about how, you make dwarf jokes, I make eunuch jokes, because they're the eunuchs surrounding him. Viserys says, I do not make dwarf jokes. And Tyrion goes, you think them.
Yeah.
I just thought that was great.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's such a great, those two characters interacting, just one of my favorite parts of the show.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Although that does lead me to talk about another scene that just, again, felt rushed in a way that I didn't necessarily like, which was Tyrion freeing the dragons.
Yeah.
And not that the dragons wasn't time to free the dragons, because they'd been off screen for a long time, and I think we're all ready for them to be unleashed. But the fact that Tyrion, it didn't he's supposed to be this very intellectual guy, right? He's able to see the angles, and that's why he's so smart. He can outplan people, he can outwit people. That's his talent. And yet his first plan, just to hear about dragons, like, yep, we got to release the dragons. I'll just go down there and do it myself. That seems like the best idea. Like, without even I don't have like a book that told me like this is how you talk to dragons. I didn't read a thing about, well, dragons won't eat you if you rub garlic on your belly or whatever. That there could have been something.
That's true, by the way.
Yeah. Oh,
I've been rubbing garlic on my belly for years, not eaten by a single dragon, sir.
Have you even seen? And dragons don't even come near you, right? Like,
right?
not
No.
Within eyesight. So yeah. Well, there you
Saw
go.
a drag queen once. She was all over me. Loved garlic.
Ironically, but. So yeah. So anyway, that's just another scene where I felt like, could they have done something where he sent an Unsullied in there to do it, or they
not after the eunuch comment, but somebody, sure.
Yeah. Well, not Grey Worm. Grey Worm obviously is dead to Grey Worm, but no. You could, or like I said, or done, or come up with some kind of contraption to maybe release them from a distance.
Yeah, this was a guy that had like a special saddle built for him so he could ride a horse. You'd think he'd be a little more wary around dragons. Sure.
Yeah, so I don't know. That's just another scene that just felt like they're like, well, let's get rid of these dragons somehow. All right, let's just send Tyrion down and get it over with. And
I agree. It does seem like
and it fits into the pattern of what we saw last week with Tyrion, where they're wandering out in the open through the city, where it seems like they would clearly be targets, and it's a level of caution that doesn't seem to gel with Tyrion's personality that we have known heretofore. Yes, he's willing to take risks when they're necessary or the upside is great enough. and there aren't other options. But these situations didn't feel like that.
Yeah, and I feel like there's the devil's advocate side where, Tyrion has long since had a fascination with dragons, and he's always wanted to ride a dragon. Of course, there are theories that he will get to ride a dragon, but this does feel like a cheap shortcut to that. Doesn't feel earned, for sure.
So yeah. So I don't know. I mean, it seemed like we're criticizing it a lot of this episode.
I know, it's really awesome. And a lot of the criticism, I think, for both of us, what I'm hearing from you is correct, is sort of a worry of how we move forward from here. Not so much directly on the episode, and there are things to critique, but there is this feeling that perhaps the show might go off the rails. And that's, I mean, on my part, that's probably just a lot of anxiety I have now that the books are gone.
Right, unmoored from the books. Mm-hmm. Yeah, will they? Yeah, I'm not overly concerned about it. I think they'll definitely find their footing, but and it's again not by any means were these first two episodes bad or not enjoyable.
No, they're awesome.
But given what we have come to expect, obviously the bar is extremely high for this show, and they definitely felt like there were some missteps in the first two episodes in terms of, what we know this show can be and what it has been.
The subheading for this show, The Pod Couple, should just be like, we shit all over shit we love and then apologize for it. This is like constantly what we're doing. Paul Thomas Anderson's a genius, except for this one thing he did. What an asshole.
Well, that's what you come to listen for, right, folks?
Exactly.
I mean, if you're listening to this show, that's the kind of thing you enjoy.
Yep.
And if you don't, then you shouldn't be listening to this show because we're going to keep getting it.
White men. Any parting thoughts on Game of Thrones, Kyle, for this week? I don't think so far that I've given enough credit to Arya Stark as a character and to Mazzy. Is Mazzy?
I always say Maisie, but
Mazzy.
Could be Mazzy. It's Maisie Williams.
as an actress, she's great. I mean, it's such a great character, and she, unlike the character or the actress of Daenerys in the weight that we've talked about, she sort of lacks some of the time. I don't feel like Maisie Williams has this problem at all. I mean, she's Arya Stark to a T, man.
Yeah, and really, I mean, in general, when you look at how good the kids have been, especially given that they were cast when they were quite a bit younger than they are now.
Yeah, even Tommen's doing a great job.
Yeah, it's hard, because casting kids, I think, is one of the hardest things because you just don't know. And if you get stuck with, sometimes they grow up to be, Kieran Shipka as Sally Draper, and sometimes they grow up to be one of 400 different Bobby Drapers. So, but so you're rolling the dice, but they just came up, rolling sixes every time. It seems like with these kids, or at least very near to it. And yeah, she might be the best of the bunch. So yeah, I agree with that. I don't know. I guess my only parting thought would be to say that I'm very curious to see where it goes with Jon. Like, what are the consequences or the after effects of him being dead for a day or so? Like, does he come back with some sort of zombie-ish state, where he's, is he going to have some kind of weakness now as a result of the death, or
is he going to be the reincarnation
power, some kind of curse
of the Lord of Light?
Right. Yeah. Azor Ahai, as they say. Yeah. I mean, I think that's probably going to be certainly how the way Melisandre sees it, and that's going to be her now. She realizes that Stannis was not that, and it was Jon. I mean, I think that's been coming. But as far as like, how does Jon actually get affected? Like, is he basically just the same dude, and he has the exact same set of skills and abilities that he had before he died? He just
oh, dude, what if he just goes Hodor the entire time?
That's what happened to Hodor. He was stabbed to death and brought back. Yeah, maybe. I mean, we'll see. But that's the interesting thing to me, is to see where it goes. And I wonder if they will jump right back into that, or if they'll make us wait, for an episode.
I imagine they make us wait.
Yeah. Like you said, they do like to get those balls nice and blue.
Well, speaking of blue balls, I don't actually have a segue. It just seemed like one would come.
Yeah, it did seem one would come. So, speaking of someone with
A needle pulling thread. So, right?
Oh, you ruined my segue. I was gonna play off your blue balls thing.
Oh, okay, go for it.
Well, now you ruined it.
No, it's totally organic. We can edit this part out.
Speaking of somebody with blue balls,
A long, long way to run.
and then coming with a fury,
Oh, yeah.
Hillary Clinton's Oppo team, I think, just shot their wad when they saw that Donald Trump is the last man standing on the Republican side of the slate. Well,
Orange pudding.
Man, cretin. I don't know how you want to describe him. Somehow, some way, Ted Cruz dropped out of the race, followed shortly by
Jolly G. Willikers.
John Kasich, who said that the Lord told him it was time to leave the race. You think that the Lord is a little slow on the draw there. Of course, the
Did take him 7 days to make the earth, man, or 6.
Yeah, I mean the Republican,
depending on who you believe.
The Republican voters had been telling John Kasich to get out of the race for months.
He couldn't hear them. He was chewing so loud, so constantly.
But I guess the Lord finally was the one who broke the camel's back, and so that leaves a one and only one Republican candidate, and his name is the Donald. I don't know. It's funny. I really.
Is it funny though, Kyle?
Well, it's funny in some ways. If you are not
funny, haha, or funny, we're all gonna die.
Yeah, well, if you're not a foreign leader, it's funny. I don't know if you've seen some of the reports coming out, but essentially, like, every foreign leader is like shitting their pants by the fact that Donald Trump is doing so well, and the prospect of him becoming president is just absolutely terrifying. I read this article recently that essentially, like, every time Obama goes to a foreign country now, like when he walks in the door to any foreign dignitary's office, the first like words out of their mouth is like, "Oh, Donald Trump's not really become president, right? Like he's like, what's going on over there?
You guys are taking this reality TV thing way too far. All right, America, we get it. Enough's enough."
Obama is apparently just having to reassure foreign leaders constantly, like, don't worry, he's not going to win. Like, is just, relax. And they're like, we don't feel like relaxing. He just seems like he keeps winning.
Do you foresee, like, foreign billionaires getting involved in sort of like a George Soros-esque campaign of, like, them actually putting their money into, like, anti-Trump advertisements here just so that they feel more secure?
I mean, if they can do it, if they can find a way through the, very tight loopholes that exist for giving contributions to campaigns. We all know that it's very difficult to give money to campaigns.
Yeah, it's very difficult.
In an anonymous fashion. So yeah, but if they can somehow figure out a way around those draconian rules, then maybe. I don't know, but yeah, it's definitely because the bottom line is these countries. A lot of these countries, and I'm talking about our allies, I'm not talking about our enemies, I'm talking about our allies, who have basically built their entire infrastructure around the idea that America is solid. America is their security blanket, like literally their security shield. Like, they haven't invested money in military because that's what the U.S. does. Like, we put a bunch of money in the military, and we patrol the sea lanes, and we, keep these like all these other countries sort of under the shield of peace, theoretically. And so therefore they can, in exchange, they can open up their markets, and we can have free trade and whatever. And theoretically everybody wins. And that's been more or less the infrastructure that has been in place since World War II, an infrastructure that was, of course, set up by the United States largely, and that's the security apparatus that everyone sort of operates under. And so the thing that is the most frightening, especially when you talk about security, is instability, and nobody reeks of instability like Donald Trump.
Yeah, it's almost as if we were the world police. But now, under Trump's leadership, will be the police force from the TV show Dexter, who are highly incompetent.
Yeah. I think, so I think that's, I don't know. I mean, it is funny because I did not, even though I didn't think it was out of the realm of possibility Trump could be the nominee, there was still a part of me up until very recently that thought, very recently, I mean, up until a couple of days ago, thought somehow it was not going to happen, like that the party would assert enough power to say, all right, come on, whatever we got to do, whether it's, through a contested convention, changing the rules, from at the committee level or whatever, like we'll figure something out, rather than let this embarrassment on the stage as the leader of our party, because the bottom line is the presidential candidate is the de facto leader of the party, and he sets the tone for the party, and he becomes the ambassador for the party. And this is a guy who is going to drive people out of the party. He's going to turn off a whole generation of younger people who might have become Republicans. And again, just it's like so hard for me if I'm a Republican who is a guy who's not a Trump supporter. If I'm not in that camp,
good luck, buddy.
Well, but that's the thing. It's like more than half the party doesn't support him. It's like he's never had a plurality in all these things. He's not usually, or he's almost never getting, or he's getting a plurality, but he's not getting a majority in almost all these elections up until very recently. I mean, as they've had the candidates and stuff, it's not like he's never gotten hardly over that 50% barrier in terms of support. And
do you think there's an argument to be made that there were like 47 Republican candidates though?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's something about splitting the field too much, and that's certainly the fact that they chose not to decide to consolidate. Once Trump became a real threat, they chose not to consolidate, behind one or two guys to stop him. I think that was one of the real problems. Is it was disorganized in that way, and everyone was kind of out for themselves instead of like they paid lip service to the idea of, for the party, we have to stop this guy. But then they didn't, when it actually came down to brass tacks, they wouldn't do it. They wouldn't take the steps that were needed. I mean, even as late as this, Indiana, where basically Cruz and Kasich had a very short-lived alliance. I think it literally lasted about 2 hours.
Dude, they were BFFs.
Where they said, okay, Kasich said, I won't campaign in Indiana, and Cruz, you don't campaign in this, in wherever it was, one of the northeastern states. I think it was New Jersey, and they said, okay, we'll do, they made that deal, and then within about 2 hours it fell apart because when Kasich was asked, oh, so you want people to vote for Cruz strategically and try to stop Trump?
Yeah,
he's like, no, they should still vote for.
Well, just go ahead and vote for me.
Yeah,
still,
it's like, and it's one of these things.
Listen to your heart.
It's one of these things that just made absolutely no sense. Like, he knew good and goddamn well he had no chance of winning that state. There was winner take all state. So telling people to vote for Cruz was an absolutely like zero cost to him. And the only thing that could happen for them voting for Cruz was the possibility of stopping Trump. So it was only upside, and yet he still couldn't do it. So I don't know if these guys are just that ignorant about the way the rules work, or that short-sighted, or that egomaniacal, or what. I don't know what it is, but one way or another,
I'd say check, and check.
One way or another, their disorganization and their just utter failure to to stand up to this guy and to take him on, in the ways he needed to be taken on. And here's this is an article that was written by Matthew Iglesias in the last few days for Vox, which was, talking about how really the Republicans were in a bit of a bind because all the ways in which you really should take Trump on are ways in which they basically can't, because they're hamstrung by their own ideology. Like the idea of calling Trump out as a racist and a bigot. That's something that is, that they couldn't really hit him hard on, because the fact of the matter is that Republicans consider like reverse racism against white people to be a bigger problem than racism against minorities. And they consider, the being accused of being a racist to be a bigger problem than actual racism. And so these are things, and I'm not just making this up. I mean, there's polls that show that this is a thing. This idea that somehow white people are basically oppressed in this country is a fairly widely held belief among conservatives. So yeah. So how do you then make the argument that Trump is a racist, right? You're and they knew that, so they're stuck. But Hillary's going to have no such problems. And there's a number of other ways. The idea of hitting Trump on his business record and all the shady deals he's done, the fact that he's basically a con artist, that's something that they are incapable of doing, because they can say it, and they kind of alluded to it in oblique ways, but they can't really hit him with it, because it's like, oh, so what are you going to do to stop people like Trump that are con artists? Well, the answer is nothing, because of course, by ideology, they want to not regulate business at all. They want
you say con artists, voters hear good businessmen.
Right, exactly. So they, so they had no real wedge for that either. And there's a couple other things down the line. So it's like all the ways in which he's truly vulnerable are ways in which Republicans sort of, by virtue of their own system that they've set up, they can't hit him on for having a ridiculous tax plan, because all their tax plans were just as ridiculous. So it just goes down the line. That there's a number of reasons why they were not able to mount a defense against this guy, despite his many, many flaws. And as a result of that, he's now the ambassador to the party. So congratulations.
Do you think, are there any whisperings to your mind of some plan for them moving forward? Do they have an idea as to how they're going to handle him if he wins the election, how they're going to handle him moving on from the nomination, what strides that they can take to mitigate the damage?
Well, I think what's already happening is that you have basically people really wouldn't touch him with a 10-foot pole before, are now suddenly turning around and saying, okay.
Now they have 10-foot back scratchers. And
yeah.
They're like, here you go, Mr. Trump.
Exactly. Well, there's a lot of consultants, a lot of professional consultants and people like that are now saying, all right, well, now that he is the nominee, time to get paid, right? And a lot of these people, their whole job is to get people elected. And so, they're certainly going to do their best, I'm sure, to get him to be a more appealing general election candidate. I am very skeptical that the leopard can change his spots. I think that this
would be willing to, or is even capable.
Is capable. Yeah, I think this motherfucker is the scorpion and the frog. Absolutely. In a nutshell, I think that he doesn't matter.
Yeah,
he's gonna drive that poisonous tail right between the frog's shoulder blades. It doesn't matter if he's in the middle of a river or not. And so yeah, he can do, I think he can do at most like 12 straight hours of presidential quote unquote, and then he's
gonna go for a new record.
Yeah,
I see.
So yeah, I just so we'll see. But they're certainly going to try. I think that's obviously one thing they're going to do, and the party's obviously begrudgingly lining up behind him. But there's definitely different strategies. I know some people are talking about the idea of, okay, can we just ignore him and focus on the down ticket races? Other people are talking about, do we just hold our nose and kind of embrace him, but at arm's length and enough to try to not turn voters off. And I think you're seeing that already playing out with some people like John McCain here in
That's a good
Arizona.
Strategy. The I love homeless people strategy.
Yeah, right.
When the cameras are on. Ooh.
Yeah. Well, homeless people are stinky. Who really wants to give them a tight embrace, take a shower every once in a while, homeless people.
Get your act together, homeless people.
Can't you find a puddle under a bridge or something to roll around in? For God's sake. Yeah. Well, so anyway, it's yeah, we're here. It's a little bit hard to believe, but nevertheless, it is true. Donald Trump is the only person standing, and outlasted. Not only did he outlasted all the Republican candidates before Hillary managed to outlast Bernie Sanders. So
yeah,
even though the nomination is sewn up and has been for a while, Bernie Sanders is still hanging around, a fly on the ointment, nipping at her heels, and I'm sure it's frustrating for her because she's in the spot where she certainly wants to turn the guns at Trump full on and focus on the general election, but you can't totally ignore Sanders, but yet she can't.
Are you sure you can't? I mean, for her sake, wouldn't it be the best thing to do is just sort of...
Well, I think that's probably kind of where she plays it, but I think the danger is that if Sanders supporters feel like he's being disrespected by her just being so...
But they already feel that way,
quote
man.
unquote presumptuous.
That's not going away.
Yeah, I guess what do you got to lose there, right?
Right.
But you know, she definitely is in that spot where she certainly wants to be able to build the bridge to Sanders supporters. So the less she can do to piss them off, the better at this point. But before we move on from the Republican race, of course I do want to just briefly say a goodbye to Lucifer in the flesh, Ted Cruz. We hardly knew ye.
Yeah.
He did decide to drop out pretty much as soon as the Indiana results came in, and he elbowed his wife in the face. I think we all know he was going for a kill, but it just didn't quite work out. It wasn't coordinated enough. But yeah, and really earlier that same day, Trump had essentially accused Cruz's father of being involved in the JFK assassination. And since, we all know it's...
From a reliable source.
Right. And since we all know it's been proved beyond the shadow of a doubt that Cruz is the Zodiac killer, I think we can all see the apple does not fall far from the tree. Mm-hmm. And apparently that was just... the last straw for him and having to get out of the race. But one of the things I'm curious about is what ultimately was his reason for getting out of the race, because Indiana didn't really change that much. I mean, certainly it made it, more likely that Trump gets it on the first ballot. But, Cruz always knew he wasn't going to get the nomination on the first ballot, and it was going to be a floor fight. And so, he was hanging around. He's been hanging around for a while with that being his only path to the nomination. So what now? Go ahead.
I think that you can have in this day and age, you can have sort of like Howard Dean gaffe moments won't kill you like straight out. You don't have to have one big moment that absolutely fucks you in terms of being elected. But like Ted Cruz over the last couple of weeks, it's just been hit after hit of him looking like the biggest sap. I mean, like a 10-year-old kid just heckles him at a convention, tells him he sucks. He tries to talk to a Trump supporter. The Trump supporter is like, "You're a fish man and you're a terrible human being." Like all of this being captured on camera. He picks Carly Fiorina for like no reason, and then she gets swallowed up by the earth. It's like again and again and again, this guy just looks like a total jackass.
Yeah. Let's give a quick RIP for the Carly Fiorina VP run, which lasted a whole 4 days, I think. So yeah, I saw a great Twitter joke that said they brought Fiorina in just in time to start laying people off.
Yeah, that's about it.
So that's what she's good at, folks. Yeah. So I think, well, to me, I think that probably this is Trump's reasoning. This is Cruz's reasoning. Sorry to not be able to tell.
Potato sociopath.
Yeah, I think that most likely his reasoning was that he still wants to run for president in 2020 or 2024, and that he's thought...
Good luck, like there's going to be in America.
And I think that he... maybe that's what he's counting on, Steve.
He'll run for the United States of hovels.
Yeah. I think what he saw was that, okay, if I can get it at all, it's going to be through a floor fight. I already knew that. But now it's going to be, the odds are so much lower of actually winning, even at a floor fight level. Like that was the only shot anyway. But now the odds of even winning that way are so reduced that most likely, if I take it to a floor fight, I'm going to lose. And it's like winning that way would have already been like such like by many people considered a dirty, underhanded way to win, and would have upset, I think, a lot of people, a lot of Republicans. But I think Cruz was willing to say, like, well, whatever, I'll take it. If it gets me a win, I'll deal with the fallout. But I think,
Yeah.
but I think seeing like, okay, I'm going to be tarred as the guy who tried to play dirty politics and lost.
That makes sense.
Then that's not worth it.
He's doing the long con.
Right.
He's going to wait. He's going to have whatever pore reduction surgery he can to stop making him look like a festering pus bag constantly when he's on camera. And he's going to get his hair a little grayer, maybe try to look a little more distinguished, stick to these hardcore evangelical principles, the sort of thing the Republican Party will be totally thirsting for once Trump's candidacy, once his candidacy is over.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to stalk America for the next 4 years. He's going to just sort of slowly creep up behind America when it's least suspecting.
So send coded message to the media,
and
all in Bible verses.
And just when you're not ready for him, he strikes. Yeah, I think we all know how Ted Cruz likes to play it. So, yeah, but, this idea, Lucifer in the flesh, that's something the quote that came from the mouth of former Speaker of the House, John Boehner. And among other quotes he had for Ted Cruz in an interview he gave recently was calling him the most miserable son of a bitch I've ever worked with. And so I think that, it really is it was a very interesting interview to see what Boehner had to say about the Republican Party. And I think it says a lot about how they've gotten to where they are today, which is, John Boehner is a guy who a lot of Republicans disliked.
Did you say he's a guy or a cry?
Yeah, he's a crying guy who a lot of Republicans dislike. Obviously, they basically ran him out of the House on a rail. I mean, he did technically resign, but it was under pretty intense pressure.
Right, Paul Ryan technically accepted.
Right, and was constantly basically being reamed for being an appeaser and a compromiser and all these things. But the fact of the matter is, this guy is a true conservative. I mean, this guy's a dyed-in-the-wool conservative. You look at his positions.
He's died all right.
He likes... Yeah, he's Trump's orange. He's like a walnut or
burnt
something.
Sienna.
Yeah. I don't know what's with these Republicans and their unnatural skin colors. I don't know what's going on here. But I mean, you think that these guys would be more receptive to minorities. I mean, they're like minorities.
This is like their ham-fisted way of appealing to the minority base. It's the only thing they can think about. Look, we won't treat them like they're human beings, but maybe we'll just Jersey Shore the fuck out of ourselves.
It's not quite blackface, but we're in the neighborhood here. But with him, this is a guy who's absolutely, conservative, has the conservative principles, agrees with, basically wants all the same things as the conservative wing of the party. But the difference is that he's not an extremist on procedural matters. And I think that's really what sets him apart from, the Tea Party, from the Ted Cruz wing of the party, is that these are people who have come in here saying that the way that we're going to handle things is we're going to demand every single thing we want on our agenda, and we're not going to compromise or back down on any of it, and we are going to literally say we get all of it, or it's all of it or nothing.
Thanks be to God.
Yeah, and so this is, and it's simply an unworkable way to operate in a divided government. I mean, this is the government is very clearly not designed for that to be a workable position. From all the checks and balances that were put in place, it's by nature something even much more so than parliamentary systems. Our presidential republic is built for people to have to work together to get the business of governing done, and that is something that the Republicans, at large, have just given up on there, and the people, and that's why it's so frustrating to people like John Boehner, who ultimately just essentially threw up his hands and walked out, because Like, he is a guy who, yes, he wants these things, but he understood that there is business of governing to be done, that your job as a congressman is to actually run the fucking government. And to do that, what it requires is that you have to make some compromises. You get a little of yours, they get a little of theirs, and then, you know, maybe everyone's not totally happy, but everyone's not totally sad. And this kind of procedural extremism is just not viable. And I don't know, I think that, and I also think it's something that is extremely frustrating to the American people at large. This is not something, you know, on all sides of the aisle. I think one of the reasons why Trump is so popular is because he's got this, it's right, it's this idea that I'll come in and get things done, I'll make deals, I'll build this wall in a year or whatever. All these grandiose statements. Of course, it's just, you know, total bullshit, and it's you know, fantasy coming from Trump, but nevertheless, that's what's appealing about it, is this idea that someone could just come in and actually get shit done. And so I don't know how much they appreciate that the reason a lot of shit isn't getting done is because of that procedural extremism, and that's something that, you know, that shoving out the John Boehners of the world is not doing you any favors. This is a guy who was on your side, but actually understood what it takes to, you know, to be a fucking grown-up and get shit done.
Yeah, poor John, the American belt buckle. That's when there's a class photo and your Boehner is just poking out. It's a tiny tiny pixel.
So yeah, so that's, I don't know. Any other thoughts on the old Boehner interview there, Steve, before we turn our eyes to
well, it's
the
just
rest of the race here?
that sentiment that he has, that he can probably say more safely from that position, is obviously echoed amongst very many people, and has been consistently throughout Trump's run. And so it's so funny to see all of them now scrambling to get in line, and how disingenuous that all looks, and how farcical the whole thing seems. But, you know, that's politics.
Yeah. So, obviously, you know, we talked about the idea of these foreign leaders being quite frightened about the prospect of a Trump presidency, as, you know, anyone in their right mind would be frightened about such a prospect. But should they be frightened? And, you know, I don't mean should they be frightened if Trump were to actually become president, but should they be frightened of the odds of him becoming president? And, you know, that's what it's going to come down to now, is really, you know, I've heard a lot of people say, oh, well, you know, now that he's got the nomination, and, you know, he's only this many points behind Hillary in popularity, or, you know, in certain polls and national polls and so on and so forth. You know, and there's a lot of talk, but you know, so much of it is hot air, I think, because the bottom line is all these ideas, and people throw around, well, what if he does this, and he can hit Hillary on this, and et cetera, et cetera. And that's all well and good, but any substantive debate, any substantive discussion of his chances of winning the presidency starts and ends with explaining which states that Romney lost is he going to win. That's the bottom line. This is how you get elected, is by winning states and winning electoral votes. If you look at the map and you look at the states that Romney lost, I don't think you can make a compelling argument for Trump winning any of them. And Romney got his ass kicked, so it wasn't particularly close. So this is you know, you're gonna have to explain how he can, you know, win every state that Romney won, which is certainly, I don't even think a given. Because there are states like Arizona, which, you know, have burgeoning Hispanic populations, and they are voting or they're registering in extremely large numbers, and they're very motivated to vote. Not saying that Arizona couldn't still easily go for Trump, but it's not a gimme in the way that it, you know, has been for certain other Republican politicians in the past. And so, but even if you give him all the Romney states, which is fine, he's still got to win a bunch more states, and I don't know how you which ones. Again, you got to start giving me specifics. Which specific states is he going to win, and then start adding up the numbers. The bottom line, and one way even to really simplify it is to look at it this way: is Hillary Clinton, if she wins every state that that every Democrat has won for the past 6 elections running, which she almost certainly will, then all she has to do is win Florida, and it's game over. So it can be as simple as, can Donald Trump win Florida? And if the answer is no, then he can't win the election.
Yeah, but he does really well with the orange lobby. So Florida might be trickier than you think.
Yeah, I didn't look at Tropicana's big lobbying dollars that they can toss around there. So,
but here's the thing. Trump is a much different candidate than Romney. And Clinton is a different candidate than Obama, at least as far as the electorate is concerned. And so I think you could make the argument that in an election year that has thus far been fairly unpredictable, at least on the Republican side, that perhaps, this will just bolster the momentum. This is really going to show how dedicated people are to voting down the party line, which is a thing that is time and time again proven to be probably, ideologically a bad decision, but we do it time and time again anyway. But I think that while that probably worked to a small degree for Romney, people that weren't excited about him voted for him anyway, I think Trump actually has way more potential to pull people that wouldn't vote at all into these elections. Now, I don't know the polls so far, and I'm not saying that that's realistic, but I could see him doing better than Romney did.
Like on which states?
Well, I don't know. I don't know the board. I don't know which state specifically Romney won, but maybe some of the Rust Belt states, some of these blue collar union kind of guys that Romney sort of chopped, when he chopped off his campaign with the 47% speech. Like, I think that Trump actually appeals to a lot of those people because it is sort of this idea of, Republicans, especially less affluent Republicans, consistently voting against for candidates that are for policies that do not benefit them.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the Rust Belt states are the ones that usually people target when they want to try to make a case for Trump. But the bottom line is he can win a lot of those Rust Belt states, including Ohio, and all the states that Romney won, and still lose. And so it's a very
good news for me, good news for Israel.
Yeah, I'm just saying it's a very tall order, and I don't think people appreciate what a tall order it is necessarily when they just talk about the numbers. You have to, if you actually start adding up the electoral votes, you actually start looking, if you look at the states and look at how much each one is worth, and you start building the map, it becomes pretty damn difficult to build a plausible map that ends up with Trump at over 270.
What's your best bet at this point? How do you think, handicapping it from this far away, how does the general elections shake out percentage-wise? How badly, because you're saying Trump's going to lose, how badly does he lose? Like landslide?
Yeah, I think he loses by more than Romney lost. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you talk about him drawing new people into the electorate. I think he's absolutely going to do that, but I think it's going to be on both sides. I think he's going to draw a lot of new voters to the polls to vote against him. In fact, I think that those numbers that go to vote against him will outnumber the ones that come to vote for him. Because the fact of the matter is that he has basically pissed off and offended every single group of people in the country that aren't white men. So it's
white men. You know how I love them.
There's a point at which, you might need somebody besides white men to vote for you. And I don't know where he's going to get those votes. I mean, just the women alone, like we talked about this, I think a few weeks ago on the podcast, the statistic where, 50% of Republican women had said that they could not imagine themselves voting for Donald Trump. Now, obviously, I'm sure that number.
Yeah, they say that until their husbands get home.
A couple of shiners will change that up real quick. But you know what I mean. It's like
get hit in the face with a Trump steak, and we'll see where your attitude is.
It's better than eating it. So, but these if that that's obviously not going to hold up. I'm sure that 50% won't stop voting for him. But even, whatever that number is, even if it's 20% of Republican women or 25%, whatever, don't vote for him, that's going to be absolutely devastating. That's going to depress his numbers tremendously. But, again, when women make up half of the Republican Party, and if a quarter of the Republican Party is saying they cannot imagine voting for you, I do not think that bodes well for your general election chances. And again, I know that 6 months is a long time in politics, and we'll see how it goes. But and obviously crazy things can happen, and that's really the bottom line with with this. This is why it is scary, because as much as I am guilty as anybody of being somewhat giddy about the prospect of facing Trump in the general election for multiple reasons, not simply because I consider him to be an incredibly weak candidate, and I think we're going to kick his ass. And when I say we, talking about, I guess,
you and Clinton personally.
Yeah, since I've now wanted to make an announcement.
Gonna give it to you.
An announcement on the Pod Couple that I have joined the Clinton campaign officially. No, but I have not been asked. But anyway, H-Rod, if you're listening to this, go ahead, or one of your people, you can reach out. I am available. But I do want to say that, that not only that I think that he'll get his ass kicked, but because of the long-term damage that I think that he'll do to the Republican Party, and really just, I think, ripping off the mask and showing that there's been this festering underbelly of the party that's very ugly, for a long time. And I know not all Republicans are like this, and I have certainly known plenty of Republicans who I respect and like, and and not even when they have views that I think fall into sort of an ugly range of things, they're often good people at heart. So I don't want to try to demonize them in the way that can easily happen with these sorts of things. So, but that said, I think that ugliness that does exist in the party needs to be revealed, because some of it has been tamped down and papered over, and there's this idea that, that's just sort of the extreme fringes, right? And I think what we've seen from the Trump candidacy, if nothing else, is that it's a lot more than the fringes. And in fact, the more moderate, what I would consider reasonable Republicans, they may be the fringes at this point. So that's something that so that having that exposure, I think, is a good thing long term, even for the Republican Party, because it's going to force a reckoning for them to decide what kind of party do we really want to be. Do we really want to be the party of Donald Trump? That's every single Republican has to look at themselves in the mirror and have a long hard look and decide if they want to be the party of Donald Trump or not. So anyway, so all that said,
you think the party has basically got their finger on the button, willing to eliminate the next 4 years of this country in service to the greater good of the Republican Party moving on? You think they're just going to lean into this skid, throw all their weight behind Donald Trump, like counting on the fact that he will really mess things up, and then they can rebuild? Maybe this is the best way for them to actually rebuild the party.
This is their Ozymandias moment.
Yeah, this is their Ozymandias moment.
Yeah, I never looked at it that way, but yeah, perhaps I really need to look at the bigger picture. I'm over here beating up orange-faced street thugs,
and meanwhile the Koch brothers are Adrian Veidt.
Yeah. The Koch brothers who are potentially supporting Hillary.
Yeah.
So, well,
fine trick.
Well, you know what, the business wing of the party, that wants stability and predictability, and that is, again, the absolute opposite of what they're getting with Donald Trump. So it does not surprise me at all that people like that. I don't think it's, I'm sure some liberals will look at that as an indictment or a condemnation of Hillary, but I really think it has everything to do with Donald Trump and nothing to do with her. Certainly if it had been another Republican, a Jeb Bush or Marco Rubio or anybody like that, the Kochs would have lined up behind him, no problem, and would have fought Hillary tooth and nail. So this is definitely not that she's somehow that appealing to their interest. It's simply that Trump is that scary to anybody who cares about stability. But I did have some final point that I was circling around to there, and it was just taking a super long time to get there as I can do. But it was the idea of Trump being scary. And, even someone like me who has been, guilty of cheering it on to a certain degree for schadenfreude purposes. But the idea is that, the part that I don't want to be complacent about is the fact that however low Trump's odds are, however much I think that he's going to lose, is that crazy things can happen. And the fact of the matter is that by becoming the nominee, he is a lot closer to being the president than he was, 6 months ago. And so, what if something crazy does happen? What if Hillary Clinton has a heart attack a week before the election? Do we end up with the President Trump in that circumstance? I mean, whatever. I mean, you can obviously start coming up with all kinds of crazy off the wall scenarios.
Yeah, you can, Kyle. I prefer to look at it from a perspective of quantum physics. The arrow of time only flies one way, my friend. Trump is already president.
Well, I suppose that's true. 4-dimensional block time. Everything that has happened or ever will happen is we're all right there. So, on that note, I don't know. Is there anything else to say about the week in politics?
No, just good night and good luck.
That's a sign-off line, but we're not there yet. We're not, because we still have, I know we're probably like a couple hours in the podcast already, but we might want to break a record here, because we got to talk about the Coen brothers, and we got to do our director's series, and we got to talk about a little film called Miller's Crossing.
Yeah. Miller's Crossing is a movie. Segues. I think that one of the things with Miller's Crossing, and just to give some initial background, is that, look, there are some very well-known Coen brothers movies. Obviously, they're very celebrated directors. You have Fargo, No Country for Old Men, The Big Lebowski. There's some very well-received, some very beloved films. And then you have some of their earlier work, which I think was caught in the wake of all of that. And so Miller's Crossing, I think, is one of those movies that unless you are a very dedicated Coen Brothers fan, you may not have seen or even possibly heard of. I think part of the problem, too, is the title just doesn't really elicit a strong reaction. Miller's Crossing,
right?
What does that mean? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not going to watch a guy, like a film about a miller, like making bread or something. I mean,
only one person needs to talk about Millers, and that's Procol Harum in the song A Wider Shade of Pale, which is brilliant. That's a deep reach. It's for all the millennials out there, the big Procol Harum fans. Miller's Crossing is a fabulous film. And if you are a Coen Brothers fan at all, in my opinion, you absolutely need to see it. That's my initial review, Kyle.
Well, this was my second time seeing the film. The first time I saw it was actually at an apartment that you shared with TJ and Aaron by ASU.
Wow.
On a 13-inch television, old CRT box. This was probably circa 1999-ish.
Talk about the arrow of time, man.
Yeah.
Woo!
So, in retrospect, I do not think that was the best way to enjoy this movie. Even though I do remember enjoying it at the time, but it was certainly probably a better experience this time around on a 55-inch flat screen.
White men!
Anyway, I saw like a homeless guy under a bridge the other day with a 55-inch flat screen, so it's not like, I'm not trying to brag or anything. I'm just saying that's just like what we all have now compared to the days of yesteryear.
Yeah.
So, but
God damn, remember, Kyle, when we just used to watch movies on VHS?
Yeah.
What the hell?
That movie was on VHS. I think it was one of those all-in-one TV and VHS VCR players.
It's the sort of thing we lugged out of the dumpster of a Blockbuster video.
Right. Quite literally. So anyway, so different viewing experience, and I don't remember a lot about the film. There were a couple of scenes that still stuck out in my mind over all these years, and so it was interesting to see which ones those were, and we'll discuss that in a bit here. But yeah, I mean, one of the things that struck me watching it this time around was just how much fun everyone is having in this movie. Mm-hmm. It's not exactly a comedy.
No, not at all.
Although there are a lot of funny moments, as I think you see is the Coen brothers' way of making films, is that regardless of whether they're doing comedy or not, they can't sort of help but veer into these humorous, this humorous dialogue.
Yeah, it's the raison d'etre.
Right. and they definitely love a good gallows humor. So you see that, but it's beyond that. It's beyond the actual like humor that's baked into the script, but rather the performance of the actors. It's like you can almost sense that they're trying to restrain a grin underneath these performances because everyone's just having a lot of fun playing gangsters.
Yeah. They're all Dwayne Johnsons in this arena.
But yeah, so that was something that I really liked. I really liked to see. Again, a great cast. Everybody is good. Gabriel Byrne is the lead character here, and
Carlos Remy. That's his name, right?
No, I'm afraid not.
Miller Cross.
His name is Tommy. So
Tommy Gunn.
Good, solid Irish name. But anyway, that's a guy who really didn't end up having as big of a career as I think that he might have. And I don't know why. I think of the pillars for me, of course, are this movie and The Usual Suspects.
Right, but they're both kind of noirish. Maybe
yeah.
that was the only thing he could do.
Yeah, maybe. But I mean, I think he was solid in The Man in the Iron Mask. But
Stigmata.
So, yeah, and was he on an HBO show for a while? Wasn't there?
Yeah, there was
In
Treatment. Yeah.
So I never watched it. Was he good in that?
I think I saw an episode or two, but it seemed like that was like a Red Shoe Diaries sort of like they always had guest actors on, and it was kind of he was more of the straight man.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, but so an actor who is not even disguising how much fun he's having is of course the guy who plays Casper, John Polito.
Oh, so good, man.
And really just steals every scene that he's in.
Yeah, and he originally, I think, the Coen brothers wanted him to play Eddie the Dane.
Oh, okay.
And he campaigned, from what I've read, to play that part. That's what he wanted, and he does a bang up job, man. Well,
pretty smart for him to see that that he could. I mean, it's interesting that he had that insight that the Coens didn't. And at initially seeing him, and this is a guy you've seen him in a million things, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he's if you look down his IMDb list, he's appeared in just about every television show ever made, especially every one that involves cops or robbers in some fashion. He's made an appearance, but yeah, I mean, just this was probably one of the meteor roles of his career, and he certainly chews up every bit of scenery that is available for digestion. So, I don't know. I mean, the cast is so good that, Steve Buscemi can only get in about 35 seconds.
Yeah, it still makes a hell of an impression in that 35 seconds. That was, I think, the first time in watching the movie where that was the first moment where I laughed out loud. And it's kind of a tried and true. The Coen brothers do this so often where they're really kind of paying homage, but kind of satirizing, just giving... they just give so much reverence and still poke fun at like all of these kind of classic Hollywood tropes, and sort of it's like you have like the fast talking weaselly guy, which is a character we've seen again and again and again, and Buscemi just like kills it as Mink in this movie.
Yeah, and the whole film is so evocative of that golden era, studio era of Hollywood, very intentionally so on so many levels. And some of the wide shots they like to do, those wide establishing shots that feel like that. And just, you can tell this was shot on a back lot, and it's very dialogue driven, and the way that it feels so much like The Maltese Falcon or one of the great Humphrey Bogart films. That,
and it's still in my mind because of the dialogue and sort of the tightly wound plot. This movie predates something like Pulp Fiction or Reservoir Dogs by a few years, but still kind of has that feel.
Yeah.
Like you can feel that's on the horizon because of movies like this. I can't imagine Quentin Tarantino didn't see this before he made like Reservoir Dogs.
Yeah. Yeah, I felt like they were kind of on that corner before anyone else,
Mm-hmm.
in a way, putting that spin on it, more modern spin on that kind of thing. So, but what else did you like about this film?
Just the way that the exchanges between, I mean, there's so many good lines that every character gets to share, and so many good looks. Every conversation is like a little bit of a gunfight, which is sort of keeping with the theme, of this mobster type movie. And I liked the way that it sort of indicated that this is somewhere in New York, but it's vague. It almost could have happened. Like the time period, way more important, although that's not necessarily alluded to specifically. The time period and the atmosphere, way more important than the details of the setting.
Yeah, for sure. One of the things that I noticed, particularly after having seen Raising Arizona, was the way the Coen brothers love their over-the-top gun violence.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And this film, I mean, this is again where they're not playing it necessarily comedically, but you can't help but laugh at just how, just absolutely cavalier everybody is about blasting away. I mean, there's that great scene where the police are outside of the headquarters, and they probably fire like at least 4 million rounds into the building, like every single cop.
Such a magnificent scene. And that guy who shoots the guy that comes out is actually Sam Raimi.
Oh yeah,
who is a great in joke because Joel Coen was an editor for Raimi. So what better way to like get revenge than shoot up your boss, give him a cameo in your movie, and then promptly kill him. I just thought all of those little touches are always nice. And yeah, the guy dancing in the window during the Danny Boy scene, that spinning the gun around, shooting the floor, shooting the scene, very cartoonish. It's like that. It's like the machine gun scene from Home Alone. It's like so Scarface, old Scarface, over the top, completely crazy. And I don't know. It is hilarious and awesome.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that is one of the reasons why I'm glad we picked the Coens. One of part of the rationale behind picking the Coens was that you're going to go back and revisit all these movies. You kind of want to watch something that you're going to enjoy, and that's the thing is when you're watching these movies, like it may not be the greatest movie ever made, but it's going to be an enjoyable ride. You know,
unless you're Chris Ayub.
Whether the Coen brothers succeed or not with a given film, it's going to be enjoyable, and it's going to be a fun rewatch, because they do things like that where they're just having fun. They're not taking it too seriously. Even this film, which has dark moments, plenty of dark moments, they're still having fun, and nothing is so serious that you're slipping into that territory of dour. You can still have plenty to make you smile and grin at almost every scene.
Yeah, and so many things to latch onto in repeat viewings as well, and just the appreciation for the ensemble and the story as a whole. I mean, it's easy to like somebody like Daniel Day-Lewis in anything that he does because he's great, but the surrounding world, the surrounding universe, these are all things that the Coen brothers are meticulous about. They do very well, and they hire good actors sometimes to play small parts, or just maybe not actors you've heard of, but maybe perfect actors. I don't know the name of the guy who's the big thug on Polito's crew, but that scene where Gabriel Byrne smacks him on the head when they're about to fight, and they're just taking off their clothes very meticulously because they don't want to mess up their suits, and then Gabriel Byrne sucker swings a chair and bashes the guy in the nose, and then just that look of he's like this big wounded dog, he's like, Tommy, and then he runs out of the room. I mean, that's such a small role, but it's such a memorable part of that movie.
Right, and such a good build-up, to the joke. I mean, that's just really setting up the punchline, literally. But yeah, for sure. You're right. I mean, they do have that talent for finding people to even play the small roles very effectively in their movies. And the scripts are always so strong, so tightly written. That's something I notice on the second viewings of a lot of these movies, is seeing how like this is another one somewhat reminiscent of Blood Simple, and that it's very well structured, it's very tight, the way everything ultimately leads up to something else, like they're constantly laying the groundwork for the next thing.
It's not convoluted at all,
right?
But that doesn't mean it's not complicated,
right? Exactly. It's complicated, but it's all understandable, and when it all comes together in the end, it's kind of like a beautiful package. You're like, oh yeah, I see how they did all that. Like, and it's that's not an easy thing to do. I mean, I certainly I think anyone who has tried to write any kind of story, whether it be a long form story or a movie or anything, has seen how struggling it is to take these different plot lines and somehow bring them together.
I spent 4 years on a haiku. And then it turns out it's not 7-12-7. Fucked it all up.
Yeah.
Thanks, college.
That's a tough break. Anyway, we'll be reading that haiku on next episode of the Pod Couple. So a little teaser there for you. Tune in.
It's called Haiku Kachu.
I'm already intrigued. So let's see. Do you have anything else you want to talk about before we get to favorite scenes and favorite
I would just say it's a little bit, as a side note, J.E. Freeman, who plays Eddie the Dane in this movie, apparently took the Carly Fiorina route and was just swallowed up by the earth. He's so good as Eddie the Dane, and he's like never in anything again. I think I looked on his IMDb page, and he's been in 1 or 2 episodes of a smattering of shows, but I just felt bad for that guy. Where he was great. What happened? What happened, Freeman?
Yeah, it's true.
Just overshadowed by his Uncle Morgan.
Oh yeah, now I see the resemblance now that you mention it. The only other thing I have to say before we move on is that just as a little side note is that I like this is a little bit tying into the final scene of the film, but I like the old days when you could just like plant a gun and you didn't have to worry about fingerprints or anything, I mean, when I'm planting guns, it's like, you got to do the whole thing and you got to wipe it down and you got to go over it with the fine cloth, multiple times to make sure there's no residue, no little hairs, any kind of DNA whatsoever. And, I mean, it's almost not even worth framing somebody now,
It really isn't. That doesn't mean I'm not going to try.
Yeah.
By the way, don't look in your glove box anytime soon. There's just gloves in there. I mean, no gloves in there.
Oh, yeah.
Damn.
No gloves to keep my fingers warm.
It does. I thought about, it's funny that you bring that up because in reviewing some of these movies and then anticipating what we're going to be seeing soon, it does seem like the Coens, while they may have a reverence for bygone days, also very smartly are almost always writing stories that take place prior to sophisticated forensics, prior to cell phones, in which a lot of sort of mysteries could be cleared up. They take clean advantage of this all of the time.
Yeah,
and
which is smart.
It's pretty savvy.
Yeah. That's a real challenge for not just films, but anything. I mean, I know mystery writers really struggle with that now. When you're trying to write a modern mystery novel, there's so many things that you could spend chapters having the detective track down. That now he would just sit down and Google it, and it would it'd be done in 5 minutes. So how do you figure out all this to create the padding from point A to point B, right? And obviously there's plenty of smart writers that are figuring out how to do it, but it's, you understand the motivation to put in.
That's why they're rebooting Witness.
Are they?
No, I don't know. That'd be great though. It's a perfect time.
Yeah.
Even a lot of Amish people and Mennonites have cell phones now. Even they're going the way up. Yeah, there's like there are different, sects, or I suppose that some of them are very strict, but even they're coming more towards the light because they find that it helps their business. They'll sit there and hand make blankets, but then sell those blankets on eBay or something. So, yeah, man, times they are a changing.
They're like, look, we love God, but God damn, if
dollar bills, y'all.
If Flappy Bird is not the most addicting thing I've ever, So, So favorite scenes, favorite lines. You want to go first with one or the other? I'll let you dealer's choice here.
I think my favorite scene, one of the ones that probably sticks out from when you watched it the first time, one that certainly did for me, is of course the infamous "Oh Danny Boy" scene. It's so great.
You're stealing my scene.
It's such a slow build, and Albert Finney plays it so well. It has that sort of old school, they say later the line that he's an artist with this old man, still an artist with the Thompson, and getting to see him fully unload on that guy, the way that it's all aligned with the music, him chasing down the car like a madman, the slide out of the window, then Gabriel.
The best part is not chasing down the car like a madman. It's that he's doing it like completely leisurely.
Oh yeah.
He's just out for a stroll in the neighborhood,
strolling down the car,
just depressing the trigger
like
on
a completely sane man.
Tommy
he's
gun.
like a kid in a candy store.
Right.
Yeah, it is that sort of unbridled joy. Like, this is where he belongs. This is what he knows how to do. It's not so much the politicking. That's where he falls apart and really needs Tommy.
Right.
But goddamn, the old man's still an artist with the Thompson.
I mean, he plays it like he's walking his dog. Is that kind of calm? Just like
that's such a good metaphor, because he just looks down at his slippers,
right,
like that you would do. Little smoke coming up from the floor. Oh, time to take the pooch out.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. It's that's what's so great about that, and that is exactly the thing I remember of that whole scene, is just him walking calmly down the street, unleashing round after round, with nary a concern on his face.
And I did read that the Coen brothers actually directed that version of the song "Oh Danny Boy" so that it would sync up perfectly, because you can see, like, the line is something about burning or fire, or like right when the car explodes. You know what I mean? They sync that up perfectly, and actually ended up directing that version of the song. So that's attention to detail, which makes a scene from a movie you may have seen a decade ago stick out in your mind. And goddamn, they know how to do it. What's your favorite scene now that I've stolen that one, Kyle?
Well, I don't know if this is my favorite scene, but it's this other scene that stuck out in my mind. So since you stole my favorite scene,
Shouldn't have let me go first.
I know.
I'm an opportunistic son of a bitch.
I should have known, but. Yeah, but the other scene that I remember clearly from my watching it many years ago was the final, or one of the final scenes anyway, in which Tom Regan finally makes the decision, which they've built up very carefully, that he is not a man of violence, that he uses his brains rather than guns and bullets to solve his problems, but has finally realized that those two worlds converged, and the only smart play at this point is to finally pull the trigger, and he does so on John Turturro's character of, what was his name?
Hebe the Hebe.
Yeah, they keep calling him the schmozzle or something.
They call him that, and they call him a yecht or something.
Yeah,
something to that effect.
But Bernie is the
Bernie Birnbaum.
Bernie Birnbaum.
Yeah,
another great Coen-esque name, and
another great performance by John Turturro.
Yeah, who of course is a staple of the Coen brothers going forward, and will appear in many of the films that we'll see, and always delightful in this movie, certainly. So is a great classic chicken shit villain, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean. A guy just totally Weasley, totally, not the traditional guy who would be scary, but yet able to, he's able to use that to his advantage. The fact that people aren't intimidated of him, the fact that people aren't frightened of him.
And he's one of the more vicious characters in the story.
Right.
I mean, and it does seem to be, this is getting a bit broader, but it seems like one of the themes of the movie very much opens up on John Polito talking about ethics. And as much as his character is a complete madman, he's one of the most ethically straight characters. He never really deviates. He doesn't want to backstab a guy. Right. He'll murder the hell out of you, but only if you have it coming, in accordance with his line of morality. Right. It's like, if you cross him, you're a dead man, so just don't cross him and you'll be fine.
Right, honor among thieves.
And Bernie Birnbaum has none of that. and uses his amorality to his distinct advantage in this movie, and almost gets away with it too. But darn, got a little too greedy.
Yeah. So that scene, and that final decision to put the bullet in Bernie's head, put one in the brain, as Casper is fond of saying, and Bernie's the best part is Turturro's performance as his face changes from the realization that, oh, he's actually going to do it, and there's just like there's nothing in him that believes that Tom will actually pull that trigger until right before he does it, and then he realizes it, and you see it in his face, and then
it's such a great callback to his performance earlier in the movie, which he does this wonderful job of giving a much more convincing performance earlier in the woods, basically saying those same lines, and then you see him the second time kind of going through the motions because he doesn't believe it, just like you said, until he has to turn it on in that 1 second. It's a very fine piece of acting from John Turturro. And good shooting by Gabriel Byrne.
Yeah. Way to hit him in the
head. For a guy that doesn't ever use a gun, it's like, man, what a crack shot that guy is.
Crack shot from 3 feet away. So I'm gonna go favorite line now, so that
you go first.
You don't steal mine. But
excuse me, Kyle. Oh, go ahead.
But this is, I think you pretty much know it's going to come out of the mouth of John Polito,
right?
Because he gets almost all the good lines. Gabriel Byrne. There's a lot of good lines to go around.
A lot of good lines,
but
the exchanges between Tommy and his girl Friday, are great.
Yeah, and everyone's so young in this film.
Marcia Gay Harden.
Yeah.
She's as young as the gay is long.
So this particular line does come from Casper, played by the great John Polito, and this is after his son, who is quite the fuck up, just not very bright and basically a spoiled brat, is basically whining to his father, and he slaps him across the face and then says, "Kids, you got to be firm." And then turns to the kid, and this is the capper, says, "Oh, what's the matter? Somebody hit you?" And he starts, but he's not really making fun of him. He's genuinely consoling him now. He's bringing him in for a hug, like, "Oh, did somebody hit you? Here, let me comfort you." Poor kid, even though, he's the very one who slapped him across the face moments earlier. So anyway, I picked it not only for favorite line, but also as a parenting technique that I want to emulate.
Yeah.
So
you should, once you have kids of your own, you should do that.
I will. So they better step lightly, because you got to be firm.
That's funny, because one of my favorite lines is very similar to that. I think it's that same scene. But it's not that exact line. He slaps the kid, and it might be, oh God, I think there's two scenes, but he says, "Shut up! You got to take a page out of this guy's book. A little less you talk, a little more you think."
Yeah.
That's John Polito is just
parent of the year.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, at least the kid always got a penny.
Yeah. Even if he picked the wrong hand multiple times in a row. The guy is a real dummy.
So what's on the agenda? What's the next movie on the list, Kyle?
Well, I'm actually not 100% sure. I believe it's Fargo, but
yeah, you got to be right.
So, well, we should probably know that so we can tell people what to look for. I'm going to quickly look down our old list here. So why don't you keep the people busy with some interesting and intriguing thoughts?
On Miller's Crossing. What's
Crossing of Millers?
The crossing of the Miller, like the changing of the guard, is a saying.
Well, I'm here. I'm back.
All right, what do you got?
Yes, it is indeed Fargo. So next week, tune in for Fargo. Watch Fargo if you haven't already seen it, which you probably have. But if you want to watch it again, we will be watching it again. And
finally, Frances McDormand, loyal wife that she is, gets a chance to really shine.
Yeah. Yeah, this is
Always a pleasure to see that. And I think this will be the first time we see William H. Macy in a Coen Brothers movie, right? So a lot of things to look forward to.
And quite an entrance.
Yeah.
With
that's Met movies prior to Magnolia, right?
Yes.
So Fargo's really his first big introduction to the sort of the American lexicon of fantastic actors, right?
Yes.
And probably McDormand's as well.
It's before both Boogie Nights and Magnolia.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if this is one. I mean, he plays a very sad sack character, of course, in Fargo, and since those are also the roles he occupies in the Anderson films, he very well may have been cast on the strength of his performance in Fargo, for all that I know.
Yeah.
I haven't looked into the matter, but wouldn't surprise me one bit.
One interesting thing about Miller's Crossing, before we move on, is that during the writing of the script, the Coen brothers got writer's block. So they took a few weeks and wrote Barton Fink.
Oh, really?
Before they finished the movie, which is a movie about a writer with writer's block.
That's
and then went back and cleared it up. So them wacky Coens, is there any story about them I can't look up on IMDb?
Well, no, you don't have to, because Steve has done the work for you. And Barton Fink is a movie we will not be discussing because it didn't quite make the cut. But since we just told that story, you might want to check it out. It is also very good.
Yeah. So, onwards and upwards.
Is there any good music you want to tell me about?
Well, that depends, Kyle. That depends on your definition of good. What I do have is
nothing you've been giving to me lately.
So, let's talk about what you've listened to of late.
I had to play a little catch up this week because, of course, I had not listened a few weeks ago to your selection, The Bloom and the Blight by the Two Gallants. And then I also had missed a couple weeks ago your selection of Cloud Cult and The Seeker. And then last week you came up with DJ Shadow. So
a lot of homework.
Ran the table on those this week, and I will, don't want to get into a whole lot, so I'll just kind of give my very, very quick thoughts.
Some quick thoughts
on those three, and they would be as follows. So, Cloud Cult, definitely explosions in the sky-esque. Very intrigued to see the film. DJ Shadow, in a word, underwhelming. And for Two Gallants, wasn't a big fan of the singer's voice.
Oh, yeah, that'll kill it for you. I really like his voice, but I can totally see how that's a make or break deal. It's one of those voices that you probably either will hate or love. And it's always hard to anticipate when you're recommending bands and music to people, especially if you don't have a specific... I don't understand how the guy who does it for Pandora does it, quite frankly. I mean, geez, that is one smart human being running that thing. So this week, this is sort of as a bookend or an update to DJ Shadow, which you said is underwhelming. And I think that it makes sense that it would be, because there is sort of this idea of, in television, what we call the Seinfeld effect. When something reaches a critical mass in the popular culture, it sort of saturates then all of the and influences all of the things that come after it. So when you see the products that come after it and you are used to those sorts of things, seeing where it may have originated from is underwhelming. It's probably part of the reason that you may go back and watch an old film noir like Double Indemnity and find it to be not a very good movie. All of the tricks have been done. You know that once you see The Usual Suspects, it makes older mysteries maybe not so thrilling.
Except Double Indemnity is timeless and one of the greats and should never be disparaged by anyone.
Well, that's just like your opinion, man.
The correct opinion.
So yeah, the DJ Shadow thing definitely makes sense. And it was groundbreaking at the time. It probably, in retrospect, seems less so. Totally understandable. There's
something soulless about it to me.
That I guess I can see where you're coming from. maybe that's inherent in sort of electronic music for you.
Well, I feel like all the sampling, it's like I feel like sampling can be very effective when used judiciously, but to build an entire, as much as I like to be reminded about how fucking great Heat is as a movie, it's just like you're piggybacking off of something else to such a degree that it's like if someone was to have a podcast where all they did was talk about creative endeavors that other people did,
right?
Like how interesting would that be, right?
Who would want
to listen to that?
Yeah, a couple of dopey white men. I get it for sure, man. So it's good that you feel that way because you're gonna love Vaporwave, which is what we're talking about this week on Steve Teaches Kyle About Modern Music.
I hope they're white men.
Here's the thing about Vaporwave, not a band, an actual style of music. And what's interesting about Vaporwave
I hope it's a white men's style of music.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like first of all music is a white men's style of music. We taught that to the R&B guitarists way back in the day, man. We said, you know what? Nice job, black guys. We're going to give this over to the British.
So glad white men invented jazz.
One of the few unique American art forms, jazz. Anyway, Vaporwave is interesting as a concept because it is essentially so many genres of music that we've already talked about, like rhythm and blues, like jazz, like ska, like hip hop, have very specific roots that you can trace back. It's a thick branched family tree, but the roots are firmly set. Vaporwave is sort of a postmodern genre of music in that it started in about 2010 on the internet and kind of popped up sporadically in different places from across the globe and has grown from that. So it doesn't have a culture beyond the internet itself, but it does have a specific sound, which I'm going to go ahead and guess you're not going to love, but it uses samples, in a nutshell, it uses samples from the 80s and sort of elevator music to build loops, and it uses a bunch of wavy filters. That's kind of, I think, where the name comes from, although I'm not certain who named it, or, I mean, there's so much mystery around the beginning of it. And there's a lot of it out there. And for me it's not exactly what I listen to. So in doing the research for this, I found that I enjoyed it most by just getting on YouTube and listening to some mixtapes. Again, this is sort of bouncy, funky, recut, elevator music, 80s synth with generally some vocals that are pitched down for whatever reason. It's this kind of music that started almost as a joke, or almost ironically, like so much of internet culture is, and then people loved it and refined it. So I would say there is, if you go on YouTube and look up Video Memories Vaporwave Mix, you can find an hour of different Vaporwave songs that will definitely introduce you to the genre. As much as I was averse to listening to this when I initially found it, as I continued, I noticed some really nice, catchy soundscapes. It's very downbeat. It's super chill. Again, I was thinking a little bit about background music, but this is where, when we start with DJ Shadow and this sort of pure sampled album, this is sort of what it's evolved into. And I thought that was interesting, especially within the realms, the confines of modern music. This is really modern music. It's very specific, and it's pretty new, and I don't think that a lot of people are into it at this point. So check out Vaporwave.
This is music that even the super AIs of the future that will...
It almost sounds like if you taught a super AI, like what you would imagine a super AI would make if you lived in 1984. You know, it sounds vaguely of the future and terribly of the past at the same time. Some of the bands that I like in this Vaporwave genre are and it's all very much sort of tongue-in-cheek, referring to like this yacht rock sensibility, or this like 80s me generation sensibility. So you have Blank Banshee, Saint Pepsi is one band that's out there, Macintosh Plus is another. Some of the song titles are like Italian Yacht Night, Beach Cocktails is another that's pretty good, and one my favorite is just one called We Made It, ExxonMobil. So that's Vaporwave. Check it out. Again, Video Memories under the Vaporwave mix. And of course, my song of the week, and one that you are sure to enjoy if you haven't heard it yet already, there's a side note on the musical front. You know, as you may or may not have known, Radiohead has been slowly pulling back their internet presence over the past week. They've been deleting their tweets and erasing their Facebook, and they just recently dropped a song and a music video on YouTube. It's called Burn the Witch. Have you had a chance to check that out? Have you seen that at all?
I have not.
Definitely check out Burn the Witch. It looks like we might be seeing the ninth full-length Radiohead album coming out soon, hopefully. And if Burn the Witch is any indication, it's going to be phenomenal, like Radiohead always is. Kyle, are books still a thing?
As a matter of fact, sir, they are still a thing.
Well.
And before I remind you of that fact, once again, let me just ask you very quickly, because I'm not going to listen to all those different Vaporwave bands. The ExxonMobil one, that's the one if I'm going to pick one.
That's my favorite name for a song. I would say, yeah, listen to all three of those.
Okay.
They're all good. We Made It. Italian Beach Cocktails actually is probably my favorite.
But wait, are these songs or these bands? Like
those are song titles.
Okay.
I was just trying to give you an overview of the spirit of Vaporwave in general. But definitely look up Beach Cocktails, and that's on my Video Memories Vaporwave mix. It's the first song, I believe. It's quite good.
All right. Well, so
now
have I told you?
I was distracted, and I can't remember if books are still a thing.
Yeah, I was wondering if you were able to place it. We just talked about it recently, but
it doesn't. It sounds like kind of familiar, but
it could be a thing, but you're not sure. Well, let me tell you, they are.
Oh,
so, and the book in particular that's a thing this week is one by the name of Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, written by Susanna Clarke. Now, I know you are somewhat familiar with this property because I believe you watched the television show of the same name, based, of course, on the book. I believe
that's me. If they made a show about it, I ain't reading that book.
Why spend all this time reading when you can just sit back and have it dumped into your eyeballs? So did you enjoy the show? Let me ask you that.
I did.
I have not seen it. It's on the BBC, is that correct?
Yeah, I believe that's where it aired. I don't know if it ever aired on like BBC America or anything like that.
Yeah, I don't think it's made it over to our shores yet.
No.
So, if you I don't know how you saw it, but you have your ways.
Yeah.
So
it's underhanded little finger style trickery, sir.
In any case, this book, Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clarke, is very British, so it makes sense that it aired over there because it's just British in its sensibilities up and down. So if you like that sort of thing, you will probably very much like this book, and if you don't, you will probably very much not like it. But I know you've got a hard-on for all things Anglo.
White man!
So you might, I might even see you sporting a Canadian belt buckle right now as I'm talking about it. Mm-hmm. I don't want to give it away to everyone, but he is. But I know you're going.
That's just how I do the show.
What the hell is this book about? Is what you're wondering if you haven't turned this off long ago, which you probably have. And what it is about is it's about magic. It's about wizards in merry old England, basically in the time, this is the sort of Dickensian, like late 1800s time, in Victorian times in England, and the book is very much written in that style. It's written in a Charles Dickens style, and really that's so much of the pleasure of reading it is the way that they're able to evoke that style so effectively, or Susanna Clarke's able to evoke that style so effectively. And this, the prose is very sprawling. It goes down all these detours and goes into the history of these characters, and it's always has a lot of tangents and diversions and sort of winking at what's happening, really having fun at a remove, at an ironic remove at the events of the book, and commenting on those events in a very clever way, but also telling the story of basically the general idea is that magic was a thing in England once upon a time. We everyone knows the stories and the legends, but it's no more. And then perhaps one or two people emerge, perhaps by the names of Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, to reignite magic in the time of basically the hour of Britain's need in the war against Napoleon, and things sort of start rolling from there. But the thing that's interesting is it sounds like it could be, it's a book that involves war, involves the Napoleonic Wars and magic and all these things, but it's really just mostly drawing rooms. It's very British in that way, and that might sound, you might say, oh, well, that doesn't, it sounded like it was pretty
you might say, I hate Charles Dickens.
Yeah,
he was a stuck-up doofus.
Yeah, you might say that, but you would be wrong. And no, I mean, I think that it sounds like you think, oh, well, that the exciting parts you just explained, those are the stuff that made me interested in this book, and now you're telling me stuff that makes it not sound interesting. But I just, it's one of those things you probably just have to experience it to really appreciate it. And so, as we do, I'm going to read a little bit, and if you don't like this is
your most posh accent, please, Kyle.
I cannot do accents at all, so I will not be. You'll be getting the white man accent of Mr. Kyle Gherkin, and you're going.
Let's just change the name of the podcast.
Yeah, I know. I think we've struck gold here, But anyway, this is the very first page of the book, and as I've discussed on a previous podcast, a lot of times that first page, or first couple of pages, is such a great indication. Right away whether this book's going to be for you or not, and I think that's definitely the case with this one. So I will read it, and then if you like it, check it out. If you don't, then
go fuck yourselves.
Thanks,
Grandma.
Thanks for saying it for me. All right. Some years ago, there was in the city of York a society of magicians. They met upon the third Wednesday of every month and read each other long, dull papers upon the history of English magic. They were gentlemen magicians, which is to say they had never harmed anyone by magic, nor ever done anyone the slightest good. In fact, to own the truth, not one of these magicians had ever cast the smallest spell, nor by magic caused one leaf to tremble upon a tree, made one mote of dust alter its course, or changed a single hair upon anyone's head. But with this minor reservation, they enjoyed a reputation as some of the wisest and most magical gentlemen in Yorkshire. A great magician has said of his profession that his practitioners, quote, must pound and rack their brains to make the least learning go in, but quarreling always comes very naturally to them, and the York magicians had proved the truth of this for a number of years. In the autumn of 1806, they received an addition in a gentleman called John Secundus. At the first meeting that he attended, Mr. Secundus rose and addressed the society. He began by complimenting the gentlemen upon their distinguished history. He listed many celebrated magicians and historians that had at one time or another belonged to the York Society. He hinted that it had been no small inducement to him in coming to York to know of the existence of such a society. Northern magicians, he reminded his audience, had always been better respected than southern ones. Mr. Secundus said that he had studied magic for many years and knew the histories of all the great magicians of long ago. He read the new publications upon the subject and had even made modest contributions to their number, but recently he had begun to wonder why the great feats of magic that he had read about remained on the pages of his book and were no longer seen in the street or written about in the newspapers. Mr. Secundus wished to know, he said, why modern magicians were unable to work the magic they wrote about. In short, he wished to know why there was no more magic done in England.
It's interesting because I believe the television show opens up with that exact like voiceover. So because it all sounded
the exact
very familiar.
voiceover, like me?
that you doing it.
I need to get some goddamn royalties.
I thought it sounded familiar when I heard it. I was like, God, who's that gorgeous bass coming through into my virgin white men ears? It does seem like the book and the show, from what I can recall, sort of does thumb its nose at the traditional upstairs downstairs kind of British genre that they're so famous for. It does seem like it pokes fun of the aristocracy.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Quite a bit. And so that's what separates it from perhaps the droll Dickensian works we were forced to read in high school. Definitely something I would be interested in. How many books? Just one, or?
I'm actually not sure if there is a sequel. It's a pretty long book. I don't remember the exact page count. Of course, I read it on a Kindle, but it definitely took me a good bit of time, and so it's a pretty expansive book, but very enjoyable. It's one of those ones that you're sad when it ends because it's not a world that you want to leave. You know, it's always like there's certain books that, you know, when you have a chance to curl up with it, it's just fun to be ensconced in that universe, and that is certainly the case with this book. And so I hope there is a sequel, because I very much would be interested to going back to the world of Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell as presented by Susanna Clarke. And
with that,
I think that we probably should wrap this thing up. As per usual, we're way over time.
You love it. Not you, Kyle. You got to get some sleep, but they love it. And not them either. I'm just thinking of me. I love it.
Well, as long as someone does. And so I will bid you adieu.
Follow us on Twitter. Tweeter us on Followbook, and book us for your next live podcast need at thepodcouple.com. This is Kyle Gherkin. I'm Slow Limbaugh. Signing off.
Good luck and good night. Oh wait, was it the other way around? Is it?